The first rays of the morning sun had not yet appeared over the hills of Enugu when Adiz slowly opened her eyes. The room was still dark, and the cold Harmattan breeze slipped through the broken wooden window. She lay on a thin raffia mat spread across the cracked cement floor. There was no mattress, no pillow, and only a faded wrapper covered her body. She listened carefully. The house was quiet. For a brief moment, she wished she could close her eyes again and dream of her late mother, the only person who had ever made her feel loved. But that peace lasted only a few seconds. Adiz! The sharp voice pierced through the silence. Adiz! Are you still sleeping? Lazy girl. Adiz jumped to her feet immediately. I'm coming, Mama. She hurried outside, tying her wrapper tightly around her waist. The compound was covered with dry leaves from the mango tree that stood in the center. Chickens scratched the dusty ground while the family's goat chewed lazily near the fence. Standing with her arms folded was her stepmother, Ngozi. She wore an expensive wrapper and matching head tie, looking fresh despite the early hour. Her face twisted with annoyance the moment she saw Adiz. So you have finally decided to wake up? I'm sorry, Mama. Sorry. Ngozi snapped. Will sorry sweep this compound? Will sorry fetch water? Will sorry prepare breakfast? Adiz lowered her head. No, Mama. Then stop standing there like a statue and start working. Yes, Mama. Without another word, Adiz picked up the old broom and began sweeping the compound. The dust rose into the air as she worked. Her hands were already rough from years of hard labor despite being only 24 years old. While other young women in Enugu were preparing for work in offices, schools, and shops, Adiz spent every day serving a family that treated her like a servant. She was not always like this. Years ago, before sorrow found her, she had been the happiest little girl in the neighborhood. Her mother, Grace Okeke, had been known throughout Enugu for her kindness. Grace taught Adiz simple lessons that remained in her heart. Always greet people with respect. Never repay evil with evil. God sees every tear. You may be poor one day, but never become wicked. Those words stayed with Adiz long after her mother's voice disappeared forever. When Adiz was only 8 years old, Grace became seriously ill. Despite several hospital visits, she did not survive. Her death shattered their small family. For months, Chief Okeke cried openly. He could barely eat. Neighbors comforted him and encouraged him to remain strong for his daughter. Adiz believed nothing could ever replace the love her parents shared. She was wrong. About a year later, Chief Okeke married Ngozi. First, Ngozi behaved kindly. She smiled often. She bought Adiz sweets. She even braided her hair herself. The little girl believed she had gained another mother. But the kindness disappeared shortly after Ngozi gave birth to her own daughter, Sandra. Everything changed. Adiz became invisible. No, she became useful only as a worker. As Adiz finished sweeping, Ngozi handed her 2 large plastic buckets. Go and fetch water. Adiz carried the buckets without complaining. The community borehole was nearly 15 minutes away. Several women had already formed a long queue. Some greeted her warmly. Good morning, Adiz. Good morning, Mama Ifioma. You've come this early again? Adiz smiled politely. Yes, Mama. One elderly woman shook her head sadly. My daughter, your hands shouldn't be this rough. Adiz only smiled. She never spoke badly about her family, not even to those who pitied her. After filling both buckets, she carefully balanced one on her head while dragging the other with her hand. The journey home felt much longer because of the heavy load. By the time she arrived, sweat covered her face. Ngozi did not even thank her. Instead, she frowned. Why are you just coming now? There was a queue at the borehole. Liar! Before Adiz could explain further, Ngozi slapped her across the face. The sound echoed through the compound. Adiz staggered backwards. Her cheek burned. I'm sorry, Mama. Go inside and prepare breakfast. She quietly entered the kitchen. The aroma of boiling beans filled the room. She prepared pap, fried akra, and served the food carefully. When everything was ready, Sandra walked into the dining room. Unlike Adiz, Sandra wore beautiful clothes and expensive slippers. She stretched lazily. I'm hungry. Ngozi smiled immediately. My princess, sit down. Sandra sat comfortably while Adiz remained standing nearby. Chief Okeke soon entered. He greeted everyone except Adiz. Good morning. Good morning, Ngozi replied sweetly. Sandra hugged her father. Daddy, my beautiful daughter. Chief Okeke kissed Sandra's forehead before taking his seat. Adiz served everyone quietly. As she placed food before Sandra, Sandra deliberately knocked over her cup of pap. The hot liquid spilled across the table. Sandra immediately screamed, Mummy! Adiz poured hot pap on me. Adiz froze. No, I didn't. Ngozi stood up angrily. You wicked girl. I didn't do it. Chief Okeke looked at Adiz with disappointment. Must you always cause trouble? Daddy, I swear. Before she could finish speaking, he slapped her hard. The force almost knocked her to the floor. I don't want excuses. But Daddy, get out of my sight. Tears filled Adiz's eyes. Not because of the slap. She had become used to pain. What hurt most was knowing her own father never asked what truly happened. He always believed Ngozi. Always. Adiz quietly left the dining room. Behind her, Sandra smiled triumphantly before continuing her breakfast. Outside, Adiz sat beneath the large mango tree. She touched her swollen cheek. A single tear rolled down her face. She looked toward the sky. Mama, I miss you. The wind blew gently through the leaves. Sometimes she imagined her mother was watching over her. Those thoughts gave her enough strength to continue living. After breakfast, Ngozi gave her another list of chores. Wash all the clothes. Clean the bathrooms. Go to the market. Buy vegetables. Sell tomatoes. Return before sunset. Meanwhile, Sandra spent the afternoon watching television with friends. By noon, the scorching Enugu sun was directly overhead. Adiz carried a heavy basket of tomatoes to Ogbete Market. The market was alive with activity. Women shouted prices. Commercial buses honked endlessly. Customers bargained loudly. Adiz greeted everyone respectfully. Good afternoon, Mama. Good afternoon, sir. Many traders admired her. There goes Chief Okeke's daughter. Such a humble girl. I have never heard her insult anyone. She's always smiling despite everything. One trader called Mama Uju often gave Adiz extra food. My daughter. Thank you, Mama. I know things are difficult. Adiz smiled softly. God has been kind to me. Mama Uju sighed. I pray he changes your story soon. Amen. Late that afternoon, Adiz noticed an elderly blind man struggling to cross the busy road. Without thinking twice, she put down her basket. She gently held his hand. Grandpa, let me help you. My daughter, may God bless you. She carefully led him across the road. Afterward, she returned to her basket. Unfortunately, some tomatoes had been stolen while she was away. She simply sighed. There was nothing she could do. As evening approached, she returned home with the remaining vegetables and the little money she had made. Ngozi counted the money. Her face darkened. Where is the rest? Some tomatoes were stolen. You expect me to believe that? It is true. Ngozi picked up a wooden spoon and began beating Adiz. You thief! I didn't steal anything. You are lying. Each strike landed across Adiz's arms and back. The pain was unbearable. Chief Okeke arrived home just as Ngozi was beating her. He looked at the scene. What happened? Ngozi immediately began crying. This girl stole today's sales. Chief Okeke frowned. Adiz, I didn't steal anything. Enough. He grabbed a cane leaning against the wall. Without asking another question, he whipped her several times. Adiz cried out in pain. Daddy, please. But his anger drowned out her voice. When he finally stopped, she collapsed onto the ground. Chief Okeke walked into the house without looking back. Adiz remained where she had fallen. The evening sky slowly turned orange. A few neighbors watched from behind their fences. Some wanted to intervene. Others simply shook their heads sadly. Everyone knew Adiz was innocent. Everyone except the man whose opinion mattered most. After a while, Mama Ifioma quietly approached. She knelt beside Adiz. "My child." Adiz quickly wiped away her tears and forced a smile. "I'm all right, Mama." Mama Ifioma touched the bruises on her arm. "No, you're not." She handed Adiz a small container of ointment. "Apply this tonight." "Thank you. Don't lose your good heart." Adiz nodded. "I won't." That night, after everyone had eaten, Adiz was finally allowed to enter the kitchen. Only leftovers remained. Cold soup, a small piece of stale fufu. She thanked God before eating. To her, every meal was a blessing. Later, she washed the plates, locked the kitchen, and returned to her tiny room. She sat quietly on her mat. Her body ached from the beatings. The bruises burned with every movement. She opened a small wooden box hidden beneath the mat. Inside was the only photograph she had of her late mother. The picture had become faded with time, but Grace's gentle smile was still visible. Adiz held it close to her chest. "I don't know why life is like this, Mama," she whispered through tears. "I try to do everything right. I obey. I work hard. I respect everyone. But Daddy looks at me as if I'm a stranger." She wiped her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if I've done something so terrible that everyone thinks I'm cursed." Silence filled the room. Then she remembered the last words her mother had spoken before she died. "No matter how dark the night becomes, morning will always come. Never stop believing that God has a beautiful plan for your life." Adiz closed her eyes and smiled faintly. "I'll keep believing, Mama." Outside, the moon shone brightly over the city of Enugu. Far beyond the quiet streets where Adiz cried herself to sleep, fate had already begun to move. A man who had spent years building unimaginable wealth in America was preparing to return home. He did not know her name. She did not know he existed. But before long, their lives would collide in a way that would change both of their destinies forever. The morning sun rose gently over the beautiful hills surrounding Enugu as airplanes soared across the blue sky. Inside one of those aircraft sat 32-year-old Ethan Obi, a man whose name had become well known in business circles across the United States. Dressed in a simple black t-shirt, blue jeans, and white sneakers, Ethan did not look like the billionaire magazines often featured on their front pages. Most passengers around him had no idea that the quiet man reading a book by the window owned technology companies, real estate investments, shipping businesses, and luxury hotels worth billions of naira. The flight attendant smiled politely. "Sir, we'll be landing at a Canoe International Airport in about 20 minutes. "Thank you," Ethan replied with a warm smile. He closed his book and stared out of the window. Below him lay the lush green landscape of southeastern Nigeria. The familiar hills, winding roads, and scattered villages stirred memories he had not thought about in years. It had been 15 long years since he left Enugu. Back then, he had been nothing more than a determined young man with a scholarship to study computer engineering in America. He had promised his father that he would return one day, but life had moved quickly. After graduating, he started a small software company with 2 friends in a cramped apartment. They worked day and night, surviving on instant noodles and borrowed money. Many investors laughed at their ideas. Several banks rejected their loan applications. Some friends advised Ethan to give up and look for a regular office job. But he refused. "I didn't leave home to dream small," he always said. Years later, that tiny company grew into one of the fastest-rising technology firms in North America. From there, Ethan expanded into construction, shipping, agriculture, renewable energy, and luxury real estate. Success followed him wherever he went. Despite all his wealth, there was one thing he had never been able to buy: peace. As the aircraft landed smoothly, passengers applauded. Ethan smiled. "I'm finally home." Outside the airport, dozens of luxury SUVs waited in a neat line. Men dressed in black suits stood beside them. The moment Ethan stepped outside carrying only a small travel bag, they straightened immediately. "Welcome home, sir." One of them hurried forward to collect his bag. "It's good to have you back, Mr. Obi." Ethan laughed softly. I've told all of you many times. You don't have to treat me like a king. One of the older security officers smiled. To us, sir, you've earned it. Ethan shook his head. What I've earned is responsibility. He climbed into the back seat of a sleek black SUV. As the convoy drove through Enugu, he lowered the window slightly. Warm air rushed inside. The smell of roasted corn from roadside vendors mixed with the aroma of fresh rain that had fallen earlier that morning. Children in school uniforms laughed as they walked home. Commercial buses blasted loud music. Street hawkers displayed fruits, shoes, and clothing by the roadside. Everything felt wonderfully familiar. He smiled to himself. No matter how beautiful America is, Nigeria will always be home. Nearly an hour later, the convoy entered a quiet neighborhood surrounded by tall trees. Standing behind an elegant gate was a magnificent mansion. It was the Obi family home. Rows of workers lined both sides of the driveway. As soon as Ethan stepped out of the SUV, cheers erupted. "Welcome back, sir. Welcome home." Some of the older workers wiped tears from their eyes. Many had watched Ethan grow from a curious little boy into one of the richest sons Enugu had ever produced. Standing at the front door was his father, Chief Emmanuel Obi. Though age had bent his shoulders slightly and filled his hair with gray, his smile remained as warm as ever. "Ethan, father." The two men embraced tightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Chief Obi finally stepped back and held his son's shoulders. "You've become thinner." Ethan laughed. "And you've become more handsome." The old man burst into laughter. "You're still joking." They walked into the house together. The dining table had already been filled with Ethan's favorite meals. Pounded yam, egusi soup, pepper soup, jollof rice, fried plantains, grilled fish, goat meat. Ethan stared at the feast. "You remembered." Chief Obi smiled proudly. A father never forgets his son's favorite food. As they ate, they spoke about everything they had missed. Business, family, old friends, the city, the economy. After lunch, they moved to the large balcony overlooking the beautiful gardens. Birds chirped happily among the flowers. For several minutes, they simply enjoyed the peaceful silence. Then Chief Obi cleared his throat. "Ethan." "Yes, father? There is something important we need to discuss." Ethan already knew what was coming. He smiled knowingly. "Marriage?" Chief Obi laughed loudly. "You know me too well. I've been expecting this conversation." The elderly man leaned back. "My son, you have built companies. You employ thousands of people. You've become successful beyond anything I imagined. But every time I visit this house, it feels empty." Ethan looked across the garden. "I know," Chief Obi continued. "I am getting old. I want to see my grandchildren. I want someone who truly loves you." Ethan sighed deeply. "I want that too. So what's stopping you?" Ethan's expression became serious. "I don't know who to trust anymore." He leaned forward and folded his hands. "You know what happened in America?" Chief Obi nodded quietly. "I remember. A few years earlier, Ethan had fallen deeply in love with a beautiful woman named Vanessa. She had seemed perfect, kind, elegant, intelligent. For almost 2 years they dated. She constantly talked about marriage. Ethan genuinely believed she loved him. Then one evening, he accidentally overheard Vanessa speaking with her friend. Her words shattered his heart. "I don't love Ethan. I'm only staying until after the wedding. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. My life will be settled forever." Ethan had quietly walked away without confronting her. A week later, he ended the relationship. Since then, every woman he met seemed interested only after learning about his wealth. Some pretended to be humble. Others competed for his attention. Some even introduced themselves by mentioning how much they admired his success. Very few asked about the person behind the money. Chief Obi placed a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. "I understand. I've become suspicious of everyone," Ethan admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if genuine love still exists." "It does." Ethan looked at his father. but it's becoming harder to find. The old chief smiled knowingly. My son, you're looking in the wrong places. What do you mean? You've been searching among celebrities, socialites, wealthy businesswomen, and women who attend expensive charity dinners. Ethan laughed. When you put it that way, Chief Obi smiled. True character is often hidden where nobody bothers to look. Ethan listened carefully. There are still young women who value respect over money. There are still women who wake before sunrise to care for others. There are still women whose hearts cannot be bought. Ethan became curious. Do you know someone like that? Chief Obi nodded slowly. Yes. The old man stood and walked toward the edge of the balcony. I've watched this young lady for years. She doesn't know who I am. But I've seen her. Every morning before dawn. Sweeping. Fetching water. Helping elderly people. Speaking politely to everyone. Ethan listened without interrupting. People in the neighborhood praise her. They say she's hardworking. They say she's respectful. They say she has never insulted anyone. But Chief Obi's voice softened. Her life is filled with suffering. What happened? She lost her mother as a child. Ethan frowned. That's terrible. Her father remarried, and the new wife treats her like a servant. Ethan's expression darkened. Doesn't her father protect her? The old chief shook his head sadly. He believes every lie his new wife tells. So the poor girl suffers every single day. Ethan remained silent. Something about the story touched him deeply. What is her name? Adiz. The name lingered in Ethan's mind. Adiz. Chief Obi continued. I've never spoken to her personally, but whenever I pass through that neighborhood, I notice something. What is it? No matter how badly she's treated, she still greets everyone respectfully. She still smiles. She still helps strangers. I've never once heard her complain. Ethan folded his arms thoughtfully. Most people become bitter after suffering that much. Exactly. But she hasn't. The old man smiled. My son. A person's true character is revealed when life becomes difficult. That evening, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Adiz. After dinner, he walked alone through the mansion's beautiful gardens. The moon reflected on the small fountain nearby. His father's words echoed repeatedly in his mind. She still smiles. She still helps strangers. She remains respectful. He remembered the countless women who had introduced themselves to him through wealth and influence. Designer handbags, luxury vacations, expensive restaurants, social media fame. Many had seemed impressive, yet none had given him peace. He smiled faintly. Maybe father is right. The next morning, Ethan decided to drive through Enugu alone. Ignoring the protests of his security team, he chose a simple SUV instead of the long convoy. He wanted to experience the city as an ordinary man. As he drove through the bustling streets, he admired how much Enugu had changed. New shopping centers had appeared. Modern buildings stood beside older colonial structures. Young entrepreneurs operated cafes and technology hubs. Still, many familiar landmarks remained. He stopped briefly at a roadside food vendor. The elderly woman recognized him immediately. Young Ethan. He laughed. Mama Chica? She covered her mouth in surprise. My son. She hugged him tightly. You've become such a great man. I'm still the same Ethan. She refused to let him pay for his breakfast. You used to buy akara for me before school. Today it's free. He smiled gratefully. Thank you. Before leaving, Ethan asked casually, Mama Chica, do you know a young woman named Adiz? The elderly woman immediately smiled. Who doesn't know that child? You know her. Everyone around Agbit knows her. What kind of person is she? Mama Chica sighed. If kindness had a face, it would look like Adiz. Ethan listened carefully. Even when she has nothing to eat, she still helps people. I've seen her give away the little food she had. Another trader nearby joined the conversation. That girl deserves better. The way her stepmother treats her is heartbreaking. A third trader nodded. but she never answers back. Ethan noticed something remarkable. None of them spoke about Adi's beauty. None mentioned her appearance. They all praised only one thing, her character. As he drove away, he smiled quietly. Perhaps his father had not exaggerated after all. Later that evening, Ethan returned to the mansion. Chief Obi looked up from his newspaper. "So, you went looking?" Ethan laughed. "You knew. A father always knows." Ethan sat beside him. "I asked people about Adiz, and they all said the same thing." Chief Obi smiled knowingly. "I expected nothing less." Ethan looked toward the setting sun beyond the garden. "I want to meet her." The old man's smile widened. "Then don't wait." "When?" "Tomorrow." Ethan nodded. Tomorrow. Neither father nor son knew that at that very moment, greed had already begun to stir in another part of Enugu. Inside Chief Okeke's house, Ngozi would soon hear that an incredibly wealthy man was coming in search of the kind-hearted young woman everyone admired, and the wicked plan forming in her heart would change the lives of everyone involved. The following morning arrived with the soft songs of birds echoing across the quiet streets of Enugu. As always, Adiz was the first person awake in the Okeke household. Before the rooster crowed, she had already swept the compound, fetched water from the community borehole, and started preparing breakfast. The smell of boiling yam and fried eggs drifted through the kitchen while the rest of the family still slept peacefully. Her hands moved quickly from one task to another. She washed the dishes from the previous night, scrubbed the kitchen floor, and arranged the dining table neatly. She paused for a moment to wipe the sweat from her forehead. Another day had begun. Another day of serving a family that never appreciated her. She looked toward the window where the early morning sunlight was beginning to brighten the sky. "Maybe today will be different," she whispered to herself. She smiled sadly. She had made that same wish almost every morning for years. Yet nothing ever changed. Across the city, however, something extraordinary was about to happen. Inside the magnificent Obi family mansion, Ethan Obi stood before a large mirror adjusting the collar of his simple white shirt. Unlike the expensive designer suits he usually wore during business meetings in America, today he had chosen ordinary clothes. Blue jeans, clean white shirt, simple black shoes. He wanted no one to recognize him as one of the richest men in the country. His father, Chief Emmanuel Obi, walked into the room carrying a cup of tea. "You've dressed simply." Ethan smiled. "I want people to see me, not my money." Chief Obi nodded approvingly. "That's wise." Ethan accepted the cup. "I've been thinking about Adiz all night." His father smiled knowingly. "I expected that. I don't know why." "Sometimes," the old man replied, "God plants curiosity in our hearts because he intends for our paths to cross." Ethan looked thoughtful. "I just hope the stories about her are true." His father laughed softly. "My son, you're about to find out." Meanwhile, at Ogbit Market, news spread quickly among traders. One elderly man rushed from stall to stall excitedly. "Have you heard? What happened? The billionaire has returned from America. I heard he's looking for a wife." Another trader gasped. "They say he's not interested in rich women. He wants someone with good character." Several women immediately began discussing possible candidates. One woman smiled knowingly. "If he's truly looking for a good-hearted girl, then he should marry Adiz." Many traders nodded in agreement. "That girl deserves happiness. She's suffered enough. I've never met anyone more respectful." Unfortunately, not everyone hearing the conversation wished Adiz well. Standing nearby while buying vegetables was Ngozi. She had come to the market intending to purchase ingredients for dinner. Instead, she overheard every single word. She slowly turned toward the women. "Who did you say?" "Adiz," one trader answered. "The poor girl who lives with her stepmother. They say the billionaire's father recommended her." Ngozi forced a smile. "Oh, I see." But inside, her heart burned with jealousy. Her fingers tightened around the basket she carried. Adiz, that useless girl, become the wife of a billionaire? Never. As she hurried home, her mind raced with wicked ideas. By afternoon, Ethan and his father climbed into a modest SUV. Only one security vehicle followed at a distance. "I don't want to frighten them," Ethan explained. Chief Obi nodded. "The simpler, the better." Soon they entered Adi's neighborhood. The streets were lined with modest houses. Children played football on the dusty road. Women sold roasted corn beside small shops. The atmosphere felt peaceful. Chief Obi pointed ahead. "That's the house." Ethan looked carefully. It was old. The paint had faded years ago. The fence leaned slightly to one side. Yet the compound looked remarkably clean. Someone clearly worked very hard to keep it tidy. As they approached the gate, Ethan noticed a young woman hanging freshly washed clothes on a line. She wore a faded wrapper and a simple blouse. Her hair was neatly tied back despite the hard work she had obviously been doing. She wasn't wearing jewelry. No expensive makeup. No designer clothes. Yet there was something graceful about her. She moved with quiet dignity. Without realizing it, Ethan slowed his steps. "Is that her?" he whispered. His father smiled. "Yes." Adiz looked up after hearing footsteps. Immediately she greeted them politely. "Good afternoon, sirs." Her voice was soft and respectful. Chief Obi smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, my daughter." Before they could continue, Ngozi appeared from inside the house wearing her finest wrapper and a bright smile that looked almost unnatural. "Welcome, welcome." She hurried toward them as though she had been expecting important visitors. Chief Obi greeted her politely. "Good afternoon. My name is Emmanuel Obi." Ngozi's eyes widened. She immediately recognized the name. Everyone in Enugu knew the Obi family. Her heart skipped. It really is true, she thought. They've come. She quickly invited them inside. "Please, come in. You honor our home." Adiz quietly returned to hanging clothes, confused by the sudden excitement. Inside the sitting room, Ngozi served soft drinks and snacks she had been saving for special guests. Chief Obi smiled politely. "Thank you." Ngozi sat opposite them. "How may we help you?" Chief Obi spoke calmly. "My son recently returned from America. We are searching for a wife." Ngozi's heartbeat quickened. She already knew where the conversation was heading. "My friends and neighbors have spoken highly of a young woman living in this house. They describe her as respectful, hardworking, humble, and kind. We came to ask for her hand in marriage." For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Ngozi's mind worked faster than ever before. If she told the truth, Adiz would become unimaginably wealthy. Sandra would remain ordinary. That thought alone filled her with anger. "No," she thought. "My daughter deserves that life." A fake smile slowly appeared on her face. "Oh, you mean my daughter?" Chief Obi nodded. "Yes." Ngozi laughed softly. "She truly is everything people say. My daughter has always been kind, very respectful. Everyone loves her." Ethan smiled politely. "We would be honored to meet her." "Of course." Ngozi stood immediately. "I'll call her." Instead of walking toward the backyard where Adiz was still working, Ngozi climbed the stairs leading to Sandra's bedroom. She knocked gently. "My princess." Sandra opened the door lazily. "Mummy, hurry. Change into something decent." "Why?" "A billionaire wants to marry you." Sandra stared at her mother. "What?" "I'm serious. The rich man downstairs came because people spoke about a good-hearted girl." "But that's Ada." Ngozi quickly covered her mouth. "Listen carefully. From today, you are that girl." Sandra's eyes widened. "What if they find out?" "They won't. Just smile. Act humble. Let me do the talking." Sandra grinned excitedly. "This is our chance." "Exactly." Downstairs, Ethan looked around the sitting room while waiting. Family photographs decorated the walls. One picture caught his attention. It showed Chief Okeke, Ngozi, Sandra, and another young woman standing slightly apart from everyone else. Adiz. Even in the picture, she looked isolated, as though she didn't truly belong. Something about it bothered him. Moments later, Sandra entered wearing an elegant dress. She walked slowly, pretending to be shy. "Good afternoon." Ethan stood politely. "Good afternoon." Chief Obi studied her carefully. She was beautiful, confident, well-dressed, yet something felt different. He couldn't explain it. Her smile seemed rehearsed. Her movements appeared unnatural. Still, appearances could be deceiving. They exchanged greetings. Sandra answered every question perfectly. Yes, she enjoyed helping people. Yes, she respected elders. Yes, she loved cooking. Yes, she valued family. Everything sounded convincing. Outside the window, however, Adiz happened to walk past carrying another basket of laundry. As she approached the sitting room, she overheard Sandra speaking. "I've always believed kindness is the greatest virtue." Adiz froze, confused. "Kindness? Sandra?" Then she heard Ngozi say proudly, "Our daughter has always been the well-mannered girl everyone admires." The basket slipped slightly from Adiz's hands. Her heart pounded. "They're talking about me." She slowly moved closer to the open window. Then she heard Chief Obi say, "We came because everyone recommended the humble young lady who lives here." Everything suddenly became clear. Her stepmother had stolen her identity. Tears immediately filled Adiz's eyes. She could not remain silent. She dropped the basket and rushed into the sitting room. "Mama!" Everyone turned in surprise. Ngozi's smile disappeared instantly. Adiz looked directly at her father. "Daddy!" Her voice trembled. "They're talking about me." Silence filled the room. Sandra looked away nervously. Ngozi glared at Adiz. Chief Okeke had just entered from work and stopped at the doorway, confused by the scene unfolding before him. Adiz hurried toward him. "Daddy, please tell them. The people in the market. The neighbors. They're talking about me. I've never wanted riches. But please don't let them believe." Okeke looked from Adiz to Ngozi, then to Sandra. His face became serious. For the first time in years, he remembered every compliment neighbors had ever given. It had always been Adiz, never Sandra. He remembered Mama Ifioma once saying, "Your first daughter is such a blessing." He remembered traders praising Adiz's respectfulness. Slowly, the truth dawned on him. He looked toward Ngozi. "Ngozi, is she telling the truth?" Ngozi's face tightened. For a brief second, fear flashed across her eyes. Chief Okeke had never questioned her before. She realized she was losing control. Quickly, she burst into dramatic tears. "Oh, so now this girl wants to destroy her sister's happiness?" Chief Okeke hesitated. Ngozi cried even louder. "After everything I've done for her, she wants to embarrass this family." Sandra also began pretending to cry. "Daddy, I've never fought with Adiz. I don't know why she hates me." Adiz stared at them in disbelief. "I don't hate anyone. I'm only telling the truth." Chief Okeke stood frozen. His heart told him Adiz was innocent. But years of blindly trusting Ngozi pulled him in another direction. He remained silent. That silence broke Adiz's heart more than any beating ever had. She looked into her father's eyes. "Daddy, please. Just tell them who the neighbors always talk about." Chief Okeke opened his mouth. No words came out. He lowered his head. Adiz's shoulders slowly slumped. She understood. Once again, her father had chosen silence. Ethan watched the entire scene carefully. Something felt terribly wrong. The tears in Adiz's eyes looked genuine. The fear on Sandra's face seemed forced. Chief Obi also sensed the tension. But without clear evidence, neither father nor son wanted to accuse anyone. Ngozi quickly regained control of the conversation. "I'm so sorry. She has always been jealous of Sandra. Please forgive this embarrassing scene." Adiz looked helplessly at Ethan. For one brief moment their eyes met. He saw pain unlike anything he had ever witnessed. Not the pain of poverty, not the pain of hunger, but the pain of betrayal. Before he could ask another question, Ngozi gently guided him toward the door. "Please don't mind her." Chief Obi nodded politely. "We'll take our leave for today." As they walked away, Ethan glanced back one last time. Adiz still stood in the middle of the room, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't crying because she had lost a billionaire. She was crying because, once again, her own father had refused to stand beside her. Ethan climbed into the waiting SUV without saying a word. As the vehicle pulled away, he continued staring through the rear window until the Okeke house disappeared from sight. Something deep inside him refused to believe the story he had just been told. And although he didn't yet know it, the heartbreaking encounter he had witnessed was only the beginning of a much greater plan that destiny had prepared for Adiz. The atmosphere inside the Okeke household changed completely after Ethan Obi and his father left. The silence that followed was heavy. Adiz remained standing in the middle of the sitting room, unable to move. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks, but she made no effort to wipe them away. Her heart felt as though someone had crushed it beneath a heavy stone. She had not cried because a billionaire had come to ask for her hand in marriage. She had cried because, for the first time in many years, her father had almost defended her. Almost. But in the end, he had chosen silence once again. Sandra broke the silence with a mocking laugh. "You actually thought a billionaire would marry someone who looks like a housemaid?" Ngozi smiled proudly. "I warned you to know your place." Adiz slowly turned toward them. "I never asked for his money." "Oh, really?" Ngozi sneered. "Then why did you run into the sitting room embarrassing us?" "I only wanted the truth." "The truth?" Sandra laughed louder. "The truth is that you're nothing." Adiz swallowed the lump in her throat. "I've never taken anything from you. But today," she said softly, looking directly at Sandra, "you took something that wasn't yours." Sandra rolled her eyes. "If you were smart enough, you would have taken it yourself." Ngozi folded her arms. "Enough talking." She pointed toward the kitchen. "Go and finish preparing dinner." Adiz stood still. For the first time in years, she did not move immediately. Her father noticed. "Adiz." She turned to look at him. His eyes carried guilt, but guilt without courage meant nothing. "Daddy." Her voice trembled. "Did you really believe I was lying?" Chief Okeke lowered his eyes. He could not answer. Adiz smiled sadly. "I understand." She quietly walked into the kitchen. Behind her, Chief Okeke let out a deep sigh. Something inside him had begun to trouble his conscience. That evening, the atmosphere during dinner was unusually quiet. Sandra kept smiling to herself as she imagined becoming the wife of one of the richest men in Nigeria. Ngozi could hardly hide her excitement. Chief Okeke barely touched his food. His mind replayed Adiz's tearful face again and again. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, he quietly walked outside. The moon hung bold mango tree. She hugged her knees as she stared at the stars. Chief Okeke slowly walked toward her. "Adiz." She quickly stood. "Good evening, Daddy." He nodded. "You haven't slept?" She smiled faintly. "I wasn't sleepy." For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Chief Okeke sighed. "When your mother was alive." Adiz looked at him. "She always said you had the softest heart." Tears immediately filled Adiz's eyes. "I miss her every day." "So do I." He hesitated before continuing. I may have made mistakes." Adiz stared at him hopefully. Was this finally the apology she had waited years to hear? Before he could continue, the front door suddenly opened. Ngozi stepped outside. She had clearly been listening. "What is going on here?" Chief Okeke turned. "We're just talking." Ngozi walked toward them with an angry expression. "Talking? At this time of night?" She looked at Adiz with hatred. "So you've started turning my husband against me?" Adiz quickly shook her head. "No, Mama." "Liar." Chief Okeke frowned. "Ngozi, enough." She looked at him in disbelief. "What did you say?" "I said enough." For a brief moment, hope returned to Adiz's heart, but it disappeared almost immediately. Ngozi burst into loud tears. "So now you're choosing her over me? After everything I've done for this family?" Chief Okeke rubbed his forehead tiredly. "Ngozi, I knew this day would come." She pointed angrily at Adiz. This girl has brought nothing but trouble since the day I entered this house. Chief Okeke remained silent. Ngozi realized she was winning once again. She smiled inwardly. Then she spoke the words that would change Adi's life forever. If she's so desperate to get married, I already know someone willing to marry her. Chief Okeke looked surprised. Who? A fisherman. A fisherman? Yes. He lives in a riverside village outside Enugu. He's poor, but at least someone wants her. Adi's heart skipped. She had never met this man. She had never even heard his name. Chief Okeke looked uncertain. Isn't this too sudden? Ngozi folded her arms. Unless you still think she deserves the billionaire. Chief Okeke immediately fell silent. Ngozi knew exactly how to manipulate him. She smiled. I'll arrange everything. The following morning, Ngozi visited the small fishing community on the outskirts of Enugu. The village rested beside the calm waters of the Ekalu River. Old wooden canoes floated gently near the shore. Fishermen repaired their nets beneath tall palm trees, while women smoked freshly caught fish nearby. Ngozi asked several villagers until someone pointed toward a young fisherman mending a torn fishing net beneath a tree. That's Chinedu. She walked over confidently. Good afternoon. The young man looked up and smiled warmly. Good afternoon, Mama. Unlike most fishermen, Chinedu carried himself with quiet confidence. He wore a faded singlet and old trousers, but his posture was straight. His face was calm. His eyes were kind. There was something peaceful about him. I heard you're looking for a wife. Chinedu smiled politely. If God blesses me with the right woman. Ngozi laughed. I have someone. Chinedu listened quietly. She's hardworking, respectful, beautiful, but her family wants her married quickly. Chinedu nodded thoughtfully. I don't have much to offer. Ngozi waved dismissively. She isn't expecting riches. What is her name? Adiz. The moment Chinedu heard the name, his expression changed slightly. I've heard about her. Ngozi frowned. You have. People often speak about a kind young woman in Enugu. Ngozi forced another smile. Yes, that's her. Chinedu looked toward the river. If she's truly as kind as people say, I'd be honored to meet her. Ngozi smiled triumphantly. Excellent. She left the village believing everything was going according to plan. She had no idea that Chinedu already knew much more about Adiz than she imagined. 3 days later, Ethan Obi officially returned to the Okeke family with gifts, drinks, and members of his extended family to begin traditional marriage discussions. The compound buzzed with excitement. Luxury vehicles filled the street. Neighbors gathered outside the gate hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous billionaire. Sandra wore an expensive lace dress. Professional makeup artists had transformed her appearance. Ngozi welcomed everyone proudly. Chief Okeke forced a smile. His heart felt strangely uneasy. Throughout the ceremony, Ethan remained respectful but unusually quiet. He occasionally glanced around the compound. Almost unconsciously, he seemed to be searching for someone. Adiz. She was nowhere to be seen. Unknown to the guests, Ngozi had deliberately locked Adiz inside the storehouse behind the kitchen. She feared Ethan might recognize her if he saw her again. Inside the tiny room, Adiz heard music, laughter, and applause. She sat on an old wooden stool. Fresh tears flowed silently. She understood exactly what was happening outside. The man who had unknowingly come looking for her was becoming engaged to someone else. Not because he chose wrongly, but because truth had been buried beneath lies. She clasped her hands together. God, if this isn't meant for me, please help me accept it. Several days later, Chinedu arrived with 2 elderly relatives to formally ask for Adiz's hand in marriage. Their arrival attracted very little attention. They came on an old motorcycle and a small pickup truck carrying modest gifts. No expensive convoy, no photographers, no excitement. Neighbors whispered among themselves. So that's the man. He's just a fisherman. Poor Adiz. Inside the house, Ngozi welcomed them with exaggerated enthusiasm. Chief Okeke looked uncomfortable. When Adiz entered the sitting room, she lowered her eyes respectfully. For the first time, she saw Canidu. He smiled gently. "Good afternoon. Good afternoon." His voice was calm. There was no arrogance in him. No pride. No shame about his poverty. Only kindness. After the introductions, everyone stepped outside, allowing the two of them a few moments to speak privately. They stood beneath the mango tree. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Canidu smiled. "I know this isn't how most people dream of meeting their future spouse." Adiz managed a weak smile. "No." He looked directly into her eyes. "I won't lie to you. I'm poor. I own a canoe. I make my living from fishing. I can't promise luxury." Adiz nodded quietly. He continued, "But I can promise something else." "What?" "I will never raise my hand against you." She looked surprised. "I'll never insult you. I'll never make you feel unwanted. And every decision I make, I'll make it with respect." Adiz felt tears gathering again. No one had spoken to her so gently in years. "What if?" she asked softly. "I'm not enough?" Canidu smiled warmly. "I've heard many stories about you. People don't describe your beauty first. They describe your heart. I think that's enough." For the first time in many years, Adiz genuinely smiled. Preparations for both weddings began immediately. The contrast between them could not have been greater. Sandra's wedding became the talk of Enugu. Luxury event planners, designer invitations, imported flowers, celebrity musicians, five-star catering, television coverage. People competed desperately for invitations. Meanwhile, Adiz's wedding preparations were painfully simple. Her wedding gown was borrowed from a church member. Several places had already been repaired by hand. There were no expensive decorations, no famous guests, only a few kind neighbors promised to attend. Mama Ifioma hugged Adiz tightly. "My daughter, I wish life had been kinder to you." Adiz smiled softly. "I've learned something." "What?" "Kindness is worth more than riches." Finally, the wedding day arrived. Enugu seemed divided into two worlds. At one luxurious hotel, Sandra stepped into a gleaming white Rolls-Royce Phantom decorated with fresh white roses. Crowds cheered loudly. Camera flashes lit the air. People admired the glamorous bride. "She's so lucky. What a beautiful life. This is every woman's dream." Across town, beside the quiet riverside village, Adiz adjusted her simple white wedding gown. The dress was beautiful despite its simplicity. She looked breathtaking, not because of expensive jewelry, but because of the quiet grace she carried. Canidu waited beside an old wooden canoe decorated with a few fresh flowers picked by village children. He stretched out his hand. "Are you ready?" Adiz looked at the canoe, then back at him. She took a deep breath. "Yes." He helped her step carefully into the canoe. As it slowly drifted across the calm river, laughter erupted from people gathered along the shore. Some pointed mockingly. Others recorded videos on their phones. "Look, the bride is riding a canoe. What kind of wedding is this?" At almost that same moment, Sandra's luxurious Rolls-Royce glided through the streets of Enugu as crowds admired the lavish spectacle. Two brides, two weddings, two completely different journeys. As the canoe floated gently across the river, Adiz lowered her head. A single tear escaped her eye. Canidu noticed immediately. Without saying a word, he gently reached across the narrow canoe and held her hand. His grip was warm and reassuring. He smiled softly. "I may not be able to give you a Rolls-Royce today." She looked at him. "But I promise you something far more valuable." "What is that?" He squeezed her hand gently. "You will never cry alone again." Adiz looked into his kind eyes. For reasons she could not explain, the laughter from the riverbank no longer sounded as loud. For the first time in many years, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The small wooden canoe drifted gently across the calm river as the voices of people laughing on the riverbank slowly faded into the distance. Adiz sat quietly, Her white wedding gown spread carefully around her. The cool evening breeze played gently with her veil as she stared at the water below. She had never imagined that this would be how her wedding day would end. Not in a luxurious reception hall surrounded by crystal chandeliers and famous guests. Not inside a shining Rolls-Royce with cameras flashing everywhere. Instead, she was sitting in an old canoe beside a man she had known for only a few days, sailing toward a tiny fishing village where she would begin an entirely new life. She glanced sideways at Canoe. He held the paddle firmly, rowing with steady, practiced strokes. Sweat glistened on his forehead, but there was peace on his face. Unlike many men she had known, he did not seem embarrassed by his poverty. He did not complain. He simply smiled. After several minutes of silence, he spoke. "I'm sorry." Adiz looked at him. "For what?" He gave a small laugh. "This isn't exactly the kind of wedding every woman dreams about." She smiled faintly. "No. I wish I could have given you something better." Adiz looked at the rippling water. "You gave me honesty." Canoe stopped rowing for a brief moment. "What do you mean?" "You never pretended to be rich. You never promised me things you couldn't provide. You told me exactly who you were." He smiled. "I thought you deserved the truth." Adiz lowered her eyes. "I've lived with lies for so long." Neither of them spoke again for several minutes. The silence between them felt strangely comfortable. As the canoe reached the village, several fishermen and their families hurried toward the shore. The village was much smaller than Adiz had imagined. Simple mud houses stood beneath rows of coconut and palm trees. Fishing nets hung from wooden poles. Smoke rose gently from kitchens where women prepared the day's catch. Children ran barefoot through the sandy paths. The moment Canoe stepped out of the canoe, several villagers smiled warmly. "Welcome back, Canoe. Congratulations. God bless your marriage." An elderly woman hurried forward carrying a tray of cola nuts. "My son." She hugged Canoe tightly before turning toward Adiz. "So this is your wife?" Canoe nodded proudly. "Yes." The old woman smiled at Adiz. "My daughter. Welcome home." No one laughed. No one mocked her. No one looked down on her. Instead, every face she saw carried genuine warmth. For a moment, Adiz felt tears gathering in her eyes. This simple welcome felt more sincere than anything she had experienced in years. The villagers escorted the newlyweds to Canoe's home. The house stood near the edge of the river. It was small, very small. Its walls were made of mud, and the roof was covered with old zinc sheets that showed signs of rust. One side leaned slightly, as though a strong wind might one day push it over. Inside were only 3 rooms: a tiny sitting room, a small bedroom, a modest kitchen. The furniture consisted of a wooden table, 2 chairs, an old cupboard, and a bed that looked carefully repaired several times. Adiz quietly looked around. She had expected poverty, but seeing it with her own eyes was different. She smiled anyway. "It feels peaceful." Canoe looked embarrassed. "I'm still trying to improve it." "You don't have to apologize." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know it's not much." She looked at him gently. "It's a home." That simple answer made him smile. Later that evening, some village women arrived carrying gifts. One brought smoked fish. Another brought yams. Someone else brought vegetables. An elderly fisherman presented them with freshly caught tilapia. "We don't have much," he said, "but what we have, we share." Adiz looked at the gifts with surprise. She had never witnessed such generosity among people who owned so little. Everyone stayed for a while, laughing and telling stories before finally leaving the couple alone. As the sun disappeared beyond the river, the village became quiet. Crickets began singing. The soft sound of flowing water filled the night. Canoe lit a small lantern. "I'm sorry we don't have electricity all the time." Adiz smiled. "I've lived through worse." He nodded thoughtfully. "I know." Their first night as husband and wife felt strangely awkward. They barely knew each other. Both sat quietly on opposite sides of the room. Finally, Canoe laughed softly. "This feels funny." Adiz laughed too. "A little. We're married." "Yes." But we're still strangers. She nodded. I suppose that's true. He became serious. I want you to know something. What? I won't rush you. She looked at him curiously. You've been through a lot. I can see it. I don't expect you to suddenly trust me. Adiz stared at him. No man had ever spoken to her with such patience. We'll become friends first, he continued. And if God blesses us, we'll become everything else naturally. Adiz felt something warm grow inside her heart. Respect. The following morning, Adiz woke before sunrise out of habit. She quietly picked up a broom and stepped outside. Before she could begin sweeping, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Canidu was carrying another broom. She blinked. What are you doing? Sweeping. She frowned slightly. I'll do it. He smiled. Why? Because it's my responsibility. He laughed. Who told you that? She looked confused. My stepmother. Canidu shook his head. This isn't your stepmother's house. We both live here. We both work here. He handed her one broom. I'll sweep this side. You sweep that side. Adiz stood frozen. For several seconds she couldn't move. She had never seen a man sweep a compound, especially willingly. She quietly accepted the broom. As they worked together, she couldn't stop smiling. Over the following weeks, life settled into a peaceful routine. Every morning Canidu went fishing before sunrise. Adiz prepared breakfast and cleaned the house. Sometimes she joined the village women smoking fish or helping repair fishing nets. Other days she sold fish in the nearby market. Although money was scarce, she noticed something remarkable. Canidu never hid money from her. Every evening he emptied his pocket onto the table. This is everything I made today. Then he divided it. One portion for food. One portion for household needs. One portion saved for the future. No secrets, he always said. Adiz admired that honesty. One afternoon heavy rain began unexpectedly. The roof started leaking. Water dripped steadily into the sitting room. Adiz hurried around placing bowls beneath the leaks. By the time Canidu returned, his clothes were soaked. He immediately noticed the buckets. Oh no, he sighed. I meant to repair that side. Adiz smiled. We managed. He looked guilty. You shouldn't have to live like this. She gently touched his arm. We're together. That's enough. He looked at her quietly. You really mean that? Yes. He smiled. You amaze me. Life wasn't easy. There were days when Canidu returned home with almost no fish. Storms sometimes kept fishermen away from the river for several days. During those difficult times, meals became smaller. One evening they had only one bowl of porridge left. Canidu pushed it toward Adiz. You eat. She pushed it back. We'll share. No. You need it. So do you. They looked at each other. Then both laughed. Finally they divided the food equally. As they ate, Adiz realized something. Even hunger felt different when shared with someone who genuinely cared. One Saturday, Adiz visited the local market alone. As she arranged smoked fish on her small table, she heard familiar laughter. She turned. Sandra's friends. The same women who had laughed during her Canoe wedding. They walked confidently toward her wearing expensive clothes. One pointed at the fish. So this is your new life? Another laughed. The billionaire's wife is probably shopping in Dubai while you're selling fish. The women burst into laughter. Adiz remained calm. I'm happy. They laughed even harder. Happy? Living in a fishing village? You're pretending. Adiz simply smiled. I hope all of you find peace too. The women looked confused. They had expected anger. Instead they received kindness. Unable to provoke her further, they eventually walked away. An elderly customer who had witnessed everything shook her head. My daughter, you have great patience. Adiz smiled. Holding on to bitterness only makes life heavier. That evening she told Canidu about the encounter. He became angry. They mocked you again? It's all right. No, it isn't. She looked at him. I should have been there. Adiz gently held his hand. You don't have to fight everyone for me. He sighed. I just hate seeing people hurt you. She smiled. You already do something much more important. What? You make me forget the pain. His eyes softened. I'll spend the rest of my life doing that. As the months passed, the distance between them disappeared. They laughed together, cooked together, worked together, prayed together. Sometimes, after dinner, they sat beside the river watching the stars reflect on the calm water. One evening Canoe asked quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When did you stop seeing me as just a fisherman?" Adise smiled. "I don't know. Try." She thought for a moment. "I think. It happened the morning you picked up a broom." He laughed loudly. "A broom?" "Yes. My whole life, people showed me love with words. You showed me love with actions." He looked at her silently. "I've never been treated as someone's equal before. You are more than my equal. You are my wife." Adise's eyes filled with tears. This time they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude. Slowly she reached for his hand. "I love you, Canoe." For a brief moment he simply stared at her. Then the biggest smile spread across his face. "I love you too, Adise." The river flowed peacefully beside them as the moon illuminated the quiet village. Neither of them noticed a sleek black SUV parked far beyond the trees on the opposite side of the river. Inside sat a well-dressed man watching the small fishing village through binoculars. After several moments, he lowered them and smiled. "She's exactly the woman I hoped she would be." The driver looked at him. "Sir." The man closed the binoculars. "Everything is going according to plan." Far away, Adise rested her head gently on Canoe's shoulder, completely unaware that her husband's greatest secret was about to change her life forever. 3 months passed after Adise and Canoe got married. Life in the fishing village settled into a peaceful rhythm. Every morning before the first rooster crowed, Canoe would wake quietly, say a short prayer, and prepare his fishing nets. Adise would wake soon after, light the charcoal stove, and boil water for tea while humming the old worship songs her late mother used to sing. Although they were poor, they had grown happy together. There were no insults, no beatings, no lies, no fear. The small mud house by the river had become the safest place Adise had ever known. One cool morning, she watched Canoe repairing a fishing net outside the house. She smiled as she brought him a cup of tea. "Here." He looked up. "Thank you." She sat beside him. "I've been thinking." He continued tying the torn ropes together. "About what?" "You work so hard every day." He laughed. "So do you." She shook her head. "I wish life would become easier for you." Canoe smiled warmly. "Life already became easier." She looked puzzled. "When?" "The day you became my wife." Adise laughed softly. "You always know what to say." "I only tell the truth." She leaned her head against his shoulder. For a few quiet moments, neither of them spoke. The sound of flowing water was enough. Later that afternoon, Canoe paddled his canoe into the river as usual. Adise stood on the shore waving until he disappeared around a bend. She returned home and began preparing smoked fish for the market. About an hour later, she heard an unusual sound. It wasn't the sound of fishermen returning. It was the sound of engines. Powerful engines. Curious, she stepped outside. A convoy of 3 expensive black SUVs slowly drove into the village. Children stopped playing. Women paused their cooking. Fishermen looked up in surprise. Luxury vehicles almost never came to their community. The SUVs finally stopped near the riverbank. 4 men wearing expensive suits stepped out. They looked around before walking toward the water. One of the village elders approached them politely. "Good afternoon." One of the men smiled. "Good afternoon. We're looking for someone." "Who?" The man glanced around carefully before lowering his voice. "Canoe." The elder pointed toward the river. "He's still fishing." "We'll wait." The suited men nodded respectfully. Instead of acting proud or impatient, they quietly stood beneath a tree. The villagers exchanged confused glances. Why would rich men be looking for Canoe? Nobody had an answer. Nearly an hour later, Chinidu's canoe appeared in the distance. As he paddled toward the shore, he noticed the vehicles immediately. His expression changed for only a second before returning to normal. Adiz noticed. She frowned. Does he know them? The canoe reached the shore. Before Chinidu could step out, the four suited men walked toward him. To everyone's surprise, they bowed respectfully. Good afternoon, sir. Adiz blinked. Did they just call him sir? Chinidu quickly looked around. Several villagers were watching curiously. He smiled awkwardly. Good afternoon. The oldest of the visitors spoke quietly. We need to discuss the documents. Chinidu lowered his voice. Not here. It's urgent. I said. He smiled politely. Not here. The man immediately nodded. Yes, sir. Without another word, Chinidu walked a short distance with them behind a group of palm trees. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. From where Adiz stood, she couldn't hear anything. She only noticed one strange thing. The men listened far more than they spoke. Whenever Chinidu said something, they nodded respectfully, almost as if he were their boss. After a while, the men returned to their vehicles. Before leaving, they shook Chinidu's hand one by one. Again, respectfully, the convoy drove away. The entire village remained silent. That evening, Adiz couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. As they ate dinner, she finally asked, Can I ask you something? Chinidu smiled. You can ask me anything. Who were those men? He paused slightly before answering. Oh, they're buyers. Buyers. They buy fish. Adiz frowned. They came in luxury SUVs to buy fish? He laughed. They own a large seafood company. She nodded slowly. It sounded reasonable, yet something still felt unusual. She decided not to press further. The following week brought another strange incident. Adiz was returning from the market carrying vegetables when she saw a little boy crying near the village square. His bicycle had broken. The chain had snapped. She knelt beside him. What happened? My father bought it yesterday, and now it's broken. She smiled. Don't cry. Before she could think of a solution, Chinidu walked over. He examined the bicycle. I think I can fix it. Within 5 minutes, he had repaired it completely. The little boy jumped with excitement. Thank you. His father hurried over. I was looking everywhere for you. Then he reached into his pocket and brought out a thick bundle of Naira notes. Please accept this. Chinidu immediately stepped back. No. You repaired the bicycle. It took only a few minutes. Please. I said no. The man insisted again. Chinidu smiled. If I take money for every small act of kindness, then kindness becomes business. The man looked embarrassed. Instead, Chinidu simply shook his hand and walked away. Adiz stared after him. You could have taken the money. He shrugged. They need it more. That night, Adiz lay awake thinking. She had lived with greedy people for years. Her stepmother wanted everything. Sandra always wanted more. Yet her husband seemed completely different. Money didn't control him. In fact, he often acted as though it meant very little. She whispered to herself, Who are you, Chinidu? A few days later, another surprise arrived. A young fisherman rushed toward Chinidu's house. Chinidu, what happened? My wife is in labor. The baby is coming. But the clinic says they need payment first. The young man looked desperate. I don't have enough money. Without hesitation, Chinidu walked into the bedroom. He returned carrying a small cloth bag. He handed it to the frightened husband. Take this. The young man looked inside. His eyes widened. This is too much. Go. But your wife needs you. The young fisherman burst into tears. I'll never forget this. He hurried away. Adiz watched everything. After he left, she quietly entered the bedroom. She looked toward the wooden cupboard. The cloth bag had contained much more money than she expected. Far more than any fisherman should possess. She turned toward Chinidu. Where did you get that money? He smiled gently. I've been saving. For years. He laughed. You ask a lot of questions. She smiled. I married you. I think I'm allowed. He nodded. Fair enough. Then he gently touched her hand. I promise. One day I'll answer every question. She searched his eyes. You really will? Yes. She trusted him. So she waited. Weeks turned into months. The rainy season arrived. Storm clouds often gathered over the river. Fishing became more dangerous. One afternoon, heavy rain suddenly swept across the village. Strong winds rocked the boats. Several fishermen struggled to reach shore. One canoe overturned. People screamed. A man has fallen into the river. Without thinking, Chinidou threw off his shirt and dived into the raging water. Adiz ran toward the riverbank. Chinidou! Powerful waves crashed against the shore. Villagers watched helplessly. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, a head appeared above the water. Then another. Chinidou emerged carrying the unconscious fisherman. Everyone rushed forward. The man coughed violently before opening his eyes. His wife collapsed in tears. You saved him. The villagers surrounded Chinidou. You risked your own life. He simply smiled. We all would have done the same. The village elder shook his head. No, not everyone. That evening, the elders gathered beneath the large Irako tree. Adiz happened to pass nearby carrying water. She heard one elderly fisherman whisper, That young man isn't ordinary. Another nodded. I've noticed it too. He speaks like an educated man. He reads books every night. He understands business. And those visitors. The first elder sighed. I don't know who he really is, but I know one thing. He isn't just a fisherman. Adiz stopped walking. Her heart began beating faster. Even the elders had noticed. Later that week, something even stranger happened. A sleek black helicopter flew low over the river before landing in an open field several kilometers away. The entire village rushed outside. Children pointed excitedly. I've never seen one this close. Adiz looked toward the sky. The helicopter remained for about 20 minutes before taking off again. That evening she mentioned it casually. Did you see the helicopter? Chinidou smiled. Yes. I wonder who it came for. He shrugged. Probably some important person. She looked carefully at his face. For a brief second, she thought she noticed him smiling to himself. The next morning, Chinidou announced that he needed to travel to Enugu for the day. I have some business to attend to. What kind of business? Just something important. I'll return before night. Adiz nodded. Be careful. He smiled. I always am. She watched him leave. Instead of taking his canoe, he walked toward the main road. Several hours passed. Adiz finished her chores early and decided to visit Mama Ngozi, an elderly widow who lived alone at the edge of the village. As she approached the woman's house, she heard voices inside. The door was slightly open. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but one sentence made her stop. A familiar voice. Chinidou's. Make sure nobody in the village finds out. Another man replied respectfully. Yes, sir. Adiz frowned. Sir? Again? She slowly peered through the narrow opening. Her eyes widened. Inside the tiny house sat Chinidou, but he was no longer dressed like a fisherman. He wore an elegant navy blue suit that fit him perfectly. A luxury wristwatch gleamed on his wrist. Around him sat 4 well-dressed businessmen with laptops, documents, and expensive briefcases spread across the table. One of them pointed at a file. Our American partners approved the merger. Another asked, should we announce it publicly? Chinidou answered calmly. Not yet. Let's complete the acquisition first. Yes, sir. Adiz's heart pounded. She stepped back before anyone noticed her. Her mind raced with questions. Why was her husband wearing such expensive clothes? Who were those businessmen? Why did they all obey him? And why had he hidden everything from her? She slowly walked home in complete silence. The man she had fallen deeply in love with was keeping a secret far greater than she had ever imagined. She did not yet know the truth, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The humble fisherman she had married was living 2 completely different lives. and sooner or later, one of them would have to be revealed. Adiz barely slept that night. She lay awake on the small wooden bed, staring at the rusty zinc roof above her while the sound of crickets echoed outside. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same scene over and over again. Canoe, dressed in an expensive navy blue suit, surrounded by businessmen, giving instructions while they called him sir. It made no sense. The man she had married was supposed to be an ordinary fisherman. How could an ordinary fisherman conduct business meetings with wealthy executives? How could a poor man wear a wristwatch that looked more expensive than everything inside their tiny house combined? Most of all, why had he hidden it from her? She turned toward Canoe. He was asleep beside her, breathing peacefully. His face looked exactly the same, kind, calm, and gentle. There was no sign of deception, yet questions continued to flood her mind. "Who are you?" she whispered. Before sunrise, Canoe quietly woke up. As usual, he tried not to disturb Adiz. He slipped out of bed, folded his fishing net over his shoulder, and headed toward the kitchen. To his surprise, Adiz was already awake. She stood beside the charcoal stove preparing tea. She smiled, but it was different. The warmth in her smile had faded. "Good morning," he noticed immediately. "Good morning." He walked closer. "You didn't sleep well." "I'm fine." "No." He gently touched her shoulder. "Something is bothering you." She looked into his eyes. For a brief moment, she almost told him everything. She almost asked about the businessmen, about the expensive suit, about the mysterious meetings. Instead, she simply shook her head. "I'm just tired." He wasn't convinced. Still, he smiled. "After breakfast, rest a little." She nodded. "I will." But neither of them believed the conversation was over. That afternoon, Adiz walked to the riverside to wash clothes. Several village women were already there laughing while scrubbing garments against smooth rocks. When she arrived, they greeted her warmly. "Adiz, come and join us." She smiled politely. As they washed, the women began discussing different topics. Children, harvests, fishing. Then one elderly woman lowered her voice. "Have any of you noticed something strange about Canoe?" Adiz froze without looking up. Another woman nodded. "I have." "What?" "He doesn't behave like the rest of the fishermen." A younger woman agreed. "My husband says Canoe understands contracts better than lawyers." The women laughed. Another added, "And those expensive visitors. They're always looking for him." The oldest among them sighed. "I've lived in this village for over 60 years. I know poor people. I know rich people. That young man is hiding something." Adiz remained silent. Her heart beat faster. So she wasn't imagining things. Other people had noticed it too. When she returned home later that afternoon, she found Canoe sitting outside repairing a fishing net. He smiled as she approached. "I've been waiting for you." She placed the basket down. "For me? I caught your favorite fish today." He proudly held up 2 fresh tilapia. "I thought we'd cook them together." Normally, Adiz would have smiled excitedly. Today, she only nodded. "Thank you." Canoe watched her carefully. The distance between them was becoming impossible to ignore. That evening, after dinner, they sat outside watching the river shimmer beneath the moonlight. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Canoe spoke. "Adiz." "Yes." "Please tell me what's wrong." She hesitated. Then she looked directly at him. "I saw you." He frowned. "Saw me?" "In Enugu." His expression remained calm. "You were wearing a suit." He said nothing. "You were with businessmen." Still silence. "They called you sir." She swallowed hard. "Who are you?" For several seconds, Canoe simply stared at the river. The only sound came from the flowing water. Finally, he sighed deeply. "I knew this day would come." Adiz waited. "I've wanted to tell you many times." "Then why didn't you?" He looked at her sadly. "Because I was afraid." She frowned. "Afraid of what?" "That once you knew the truth, everything between us would change." Before Adiz could respond, the distant sound of engines interrupted them. Both turned toward the village entrance. Headlights appeared one after another. Not one vehicle, not two. Nearly 20 luxury SUVs slowly entered the village. Children stopped playing. Women came out of their homes. Fishermen abandoned their nets. Everyone stared in disbelief. The convoy finally stopped outside Chinidu's small house. Immediately, dozens of well-dressed men stepped out. Some wore expensive suits. Others appeared to be security personnel. Without hesitation, every single one of them bowed. "Good evening, Chairman." The entire village fell silent. Adiz felt her heart skip. "Chairman?" One elderly fisherman whispered. "They're talking to Chinidu." Another shook his head in disbelief. "This can't be happening." A tall man carrying a leather briefcase hurried toward Chinidu. "Sir, I'm sorry for arriving without notice. It's urgent." Chinidu looked slightly annoyed. "I told you not to come here." "I know, sir. But the board meeting cannot wait." The man handed him a tablet. "The directors are waiting." Another added, "The American investors have already arrived." The villagers exchanged confused glances. American investors? Board meeting? None of it sounded like the life of a fisherman. Adiz stood frozen. She looked from the expensive convoy to the tiny mud house, then back to her husband. Nothing made sense anymore. Chinidu slowly turned toward her. His eyes were filled with regret. "I think it's finally time." He gently held out his hand. "Come with me." She hesitated. "Where?" "So I can tell you everything." Without another word, he helped her into the back seat of the largest SUV. The convoy pulled away from the village. No one spoke during the journey. Adiz stared silently through the window as they drove farther and farther away from the river. After nearly an hour, they approached the outskirts of Enugu. Then another 30 minutes passed. Finally, the convoy slowed before enormous black iron gates. The gates stood nearly 15 feet high. Security guards in crisp uniforms immediately saluted. The gates opened automatically. As the SUV entered, Adiz gasped. A long driveway stretched ahead, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, colorful flowers, and towering royal palm trees. Elegant fountains danced beneath golden lights. Beyond them stood an enormous mansion unlike anything she had ever seen. It looked more like a palace than a home. Its cream-colored walls gleamed beneath the evening lights. Balconies wrapped around the upper floors. Large glass windows reflected the stars. Luxury cars filled the parking area. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Mercedes Maybachs, Range Rovers, Ferraris. Even the cars looked more expensive than entire neighborhoods. The SUV stopped. Before Chinidu could open his door, nearly 50 staff members lined both sides of the entrance. Men, women, security officers, housekeepers, gardeners, managers. The moment Chinidu stepped out, they all bowed together. "Welcome home, Chairman." Adiz's mouth slowly fell open. "Home?" Chinidu walked around the vehicle and opened her door himself. He smiled gently. "Come." Her legs felt weak. She stepped out slowly. Every employee smiled respectfully. One elderly woman approached carrying flowers. "Welcome home, madam." "Madam?" Adiz looked around in confusion. She whispered, "There must be some mistake." Chinidu shook his head. "There isn't." He led her inside. The entrance hall alone was larger than the entire fishing village church. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Marble floors reflected the lights. Beautiful paintings decorated the walls. A grand staircase curved elegantly toward the second floor. Everywhere she looked, luxury, beauty, elegance. She turned to Chinidu. Tears had already filled her eyes. "What is this place?" He answered quietly, "Our home." He led her into a private sitting room. Only the two of them remained. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Chinidu took a deep breath. "My real name is Chinidu Okafor." She nodded slowly. "I know, but that's not all." He continued, "I own Okafor Global Holdings. She frowned. I don't understand. It's one of the largest business groups in Nigeria. Her breathing became shallow. We also own companies in America, Canada, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and the United Arab Emirates. Adiz stared at him, unable to speak. He continued softly, I never stopped being a fisherman. I simply wasn't only a fisherman. She finally found her voice. You're rich. He shook his head. No. Then he smiled gently. I'm a billionaire. The room suddenly felt silent. The words echoed in Adiz's ears. A billionaire. The man she had shared one bowl of porridge with. The man who had repaired leaking roofs. The man who had paddled an old canoe every morning. The man she had fallen deeply in love with was one of the richest men in the country. Tears rolled down her cheeks. You lied to me. His face fell. I know. You watched people laugh at us. I know. You watched them mock our wedding. He lowered his head. I know. Her voice broke. And you said nothing. Silence filled the room. Finally, Chinedu looked into her eyes. I wasn't testing your poverty. I was protecting my heart. She stared at him. He continued quietly. 4 years. Women loved my money. They admired my companies. They wanted my lifestyle. But nobody wanted me. He swallowed hard. So I left everything behind. I returned to the river where I grew up. I became the fisherman I once was. I promised myself that the next woman I married would choose me before knowing my wealth. Tears streamed down his face. And then I met you. You married the fisherman. You shared my struggles. You never complained. You loved me when all you believed I owned was a canoe. He reached for her trembling hands. Adiz, I didn't hide my wealth because I wanted to hurt you. I hid it because I was terrified of never being truly loved. Adiz looked into his eyes. For the first time since entering the mansion, she saw not a billionaire. She saw the same gentleman who had once shared the last bowl of porridge with her. The same man who had swept the compound beside her. The same man who had promised she would never cry alone. But the pain of the secret still remained. She quietly pulled her hands away. I need time. Chinedu nodded slowly. I understand. Outside the mansion, the lights glowed brilliantly against the Enugu night. Inside, 2 hearts that had learned to love each other now faced their greatest test. It would not be poverty that threatened their marriage. It would be trust. The silence inside the mansion felt heavier than anything Adiz had ever experienced. She stood near the tall glass window, staring at the city lights of Enugu glittering in the distance. Everything around her looked like something from a dream. The polished marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers. Elegant paintings decorated the walls, and the soft scent of fresh flowers filled the room. It was beautiful, yet none of it brought her peace. Behind her, Chinedu remained where she had left him. He wanted to speak again, but he knew words spoken too quickly would only deepen her pain. For several long minutes, neither of them said anything. Finally, Adiz broke the silence. How long? Her voice was calm, but it carried deep hurt. How long have you been living like this? Chinedu took a slow breath. Almost 10 years. She closed her eyes. 10 years. He nodded. My parents built part of the company. After they passed away, I expanded it. She turned to face him. So every morning, when you carried those fishing nets, when you repaired the leaking roof, when we struggled to buy food, you already had all this? He lowered his head. Yes. A tear rolled down Adiz's cheek. You watched me worry about money. You watched me count every naira. You watched me skip meals so we could save. I know. And you never stopped me. His eyes filled with regret. I wanted to. So many times. But every time I decided to tell you, I became afraid. Afraid of what? That after learning the truth, you would no longer know whether your love had been real. Adiz shook her head slowly. You didn't trust me. I trusted you. No. She looked directly into his eyes. You trusted my kindness. But you didn't trust my heart. Those words struck Chinidou harder than any insult ever could. Because they were true. One of the housekeepers knocked gently. "Sir." "Yes." "Dinner has been prepared." Chinidou glanced at Adiz. She quietly shook her head. "I'm not hungry." The housekeeper looked worried. "Should we clear the table?" Chinidou nodded. "Leave everything. We'll eat later." "Yes, sir." After the servant left, another uncomfortable silence settled between them. Adiz slowly walked around the enormous sitting room. Every object reminded her of another question. The expensive piano, the imported furniture, the priceless artwork, the grand staircase. It all seemed impossible. She suddenly remembered something. The money. Chinidou looked at her. "The money you gave the fisherman whose wife was in labor." He nodded. "You said you'd been saving." "I did. But not from fishing." He smiled sadly. "From my businesses." She laughed bitterly. "I believed every word." "I'm sorry. You said buyers came in expensive SUVs. They weren't buying fish." "No. They were my executives." "You said you traveled to Enugu for business." "I did. You just didn't tell me it was your business." He nodded quietly. Adiz looked away. Every memory now carried a different meaning. Later that evening, Chinidou showed her to a beautiful bedroom on the second floor. It was larger than the entire house they had shared in the fishing village. The bed alone looked big enough for 6 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked beautifully landscaped gardens. Fresh flowers decorated the room. A walk-in wardrobe filled one entire wall. "This will be your room." Adiz looked surprised. "Your room?" "Our room." She shook her head gently. "I think I'd rather sleep alone tonight." Pain flashed across Chinidou's face, but he nodded. "I understand." He quietly left the room. The soft click of the closing door echoed through the silence. Adiz sat on the edge of the bed. Instead of feeling like a queen, she felt lost. That night she could not sleep. Around midnight she left the bedroom and wandered through the mansion. Everything was quiet. As she walked downstairs, she noticed a light coming from one room. The library. Curious, she walked closer. The door was slightly open. Inside, Chinidou sat alone. He wasn't working. He wasn't reading. He simply stared at an old framed photograph. Adiz remained hidden behind the doorway. After several moments, Chinidou quietly spoke. "I've made a mess of everything." His voice trembled. He looked at the photograph. "I found the woman I prayed for. And then I hurt her." Adiz realized he was speaking to the picture. She looked carefully. It showed an elderly couple smiling warmly. His parents. "I wish you were here. I don't know how to fix this." He wiped away a tear. "I promised I'd never become like the people who lied to others. And yet, I lied to the person I love most." Adiz quietly stepped away before he noticed her. For the first time since learning the truth, she saw not a billionaire, but a man carrying genuine regret. The following morning, Adiz woke early out of habit. She searched for the kitchen. One of the maids immediately rushed toward her. "Good morning, madam." Adiz smiled politely. "Good morning. What would you like for breakfast?" "I'll prepare it." The young maid looked horrified. "No, madam. Please. It's my job." Adiz smiled. "I've cooked all my life. I don't mind." The maid looked nervous. "If chairman hears that I allowed you..." She stopped speaking. Adiz noticed something. Every employee respected Chinidou deeply. Not because they feared him, because they admired him. She entered the kitchen anyway. The cooks welcomed her kindly. Within an hour she had prepared fried yam, eggs, and tea. When Chinidou entered, he looked surprised. "You cooked?" She nodded. "I missed it." He smiled softly. "It smells wonderful." They ate quietly. Although the tension remained, the silence no longer felt hostile. After breakfast, Chinidou asked, "Would you like to see something?" She looked uncertain. "What?" "The company." She hesitated before agreeing. An hour later they arrived at the headquarters of Okafor Global Holdings. The building towered above the surrounding streets. Its glass exterior reflected the morning sunlight. As their vehicle approached, security officers immediately saluted. The doors opened before they reached them. Inside, hundreds of employees greeted Canoe warmly. "Good morning, Chairman." "Welcome, sir." No one looked frightened. Instead, they smiled. Several employees even laughed with him as he walked through the lobby. He greeted many by name. "How's your mother doing? Has your son recovered? Congratulations on your new baby." Adiz watched quietly. She had expected a cold businessman. Instead, she saw someone who genuinely cared about the people working for him. During a meeting, Canoe invited her to sit quietly in the corner. She observed everything. One manager suggested reducing worker salaries to increase profits. Canoe immediately disagreed. "No." "But, sir." "No. The company earned enough. Our workers carried us through difficult years. We don't reward loyalty with suffering." Another executive suggested dismissing older employees. Again, Canoe refused. "They built this company. They deserve respect." Meeting after meeting, Adiz noticed the same pattern. He never chased money at the expense of people. The kindness she had fallen in love with had not been an act. It was who he truly was. Later that afternoon, they visited one of his charitable foundations. Children ran happily through a large orphanage. An elderly nun welcomed them. "Chairman, welcome." The children rushed toward Canoe laughing. "Uncle Canoe." He laughed as they surrounded him. Some hugged him. Others proudly showed him their school books. One little girl tugged his sleeve. "I came first in my class." He lifted her into his arms. "I knew you could." Adiz watched in amazement. The nun smiled beside her. "He's been supporting this orphanage for 7 years." "Really?" She nodded. "He asked us never to announce his donations publicly. He says kindness isn't meant for applause." Adiz felt her heart soften. On their way home, she finally asked the question that had remained inside her heart. "Why did you choose the fishing village?" Canoe smiled. "My grandfather was a fisherman. I grew up there. Whenever life became noisy, I always returned." He looked toward the road ahead. "When I lost faith in people, I went back to the river. The river never pretended. It accepted everyone equally." She quietly listened. "I thought, if someone could love me there, then I would know the love was real." He looked at her. "And you did." That evening they returned to the mansion gardens. The same gentle breeze that once blew across the river now rustled through carefully trimmed hedges. Adiz looked toward the sunset. "You know, I really was angry. I know. I felt foolish. I know. I even wondered if our marriage had been fake." Canoe's face fell. "But then," she smiled faintly, "I remembered something." "What?" "The morning you picked up a broom." He laughed softly. "You still remember that?" "I always will. You didn't know I was rich." "I didn't. You swept because you believed we shared the same home." He nodded. "You shared your food. You comforted me. You respected me. You loved me." She looked directly into his eyes. None of those things were fake. His eyes began to fill with tears. "No, they weren't." She slowly reached for his hand. "I wish you had trusted me sooner. I wish I had too." She squeezed his hand gently. "I forgive you." For a moment Canoe simply stared at her. "You do?" She nodded. "I married a fisherman. I discovered I married a billionaire. But the man I fell in love with is still the same." Unable to hold back his emotions any longer, Canoe pulled her into a gentle embrace. "I'm so sorry." She rested her head against his chest. "I know. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back your trust." "You already started." Over the following weeks, Adiz gradually adjusted to her new life. She insisted on greeting every employee respectfully. She learned their names. She visited the kitchens. She spoke with gardeners. She helped organize charity programs. The staff quickly grew to love her. Many whispered among themselves, "The chairman chose well. She's exactly the kind woman everyone described." Meanwhile, in another part of Enugu, Sandra enjoyed what she believed was her perfect life. Luxury cars, designer handbags, lavish parties. Her husband showered her with expensive gifts. Ngozi proudly boasted to neighbors that she had chosen the better son-in-law. But hidden beneath the glamorous lifestyle were secrets far darker than anyone imagined. While Adiz's marriage grew stronger through honesty and forgiveness, Sandra's perfect world was already beginning to crack. And before long, the truth behind her husband's fortune would come crashing down with devastating consequences. 6 months passed. Life had changed so completely for Adiz that some mornings she still woke up expecting to hear the sound of dripping rain through the rusty roof of the tiny fishing hut. Instead, sunlight poured through the wide glass windows of the mansion. The room was quiet except for birds singing in the beautifully landscaped gardens. She smiled every morning for the same reason. Not because she now lived in luxury, but because she woke beside a man whose love had never changed. Even after revealing his true identity, Chinedu remained the same humble husband she had fallen in love with. Some mornings he still insisted on helping arrange the bed. Other days he joined the cooks in the kitchen, making everyone laugh with his terrible attempts at frying eggs. Whenever Adiz reminded him that the staff could handle everything, he would grin. "I didn't marry you so strangers could do everything for us." She would simply laugh. The mansion had become a home because kindness lived inside it. Across the city, however, another marriage looked perfect only from the outside. Sandra had become the envy of many women in Enugu. Every weekend she attended glamorous parties. She constantly posted photographs of expensive vacations, designer handbags, luxury watches, and elegant dinners. Her social media pages overflowed with comments. "Living the dream. God when. Soft life." Ngozi proudly showed those pictures to anyone willing to look. "See my daughter. I told everyone she was born for greatness." She never mentioned Adiz anymore. As far as she was concerned, Sandra had won. One afternoon she visited several women in the neighborhood carrying a newly printed photo album. Every page displayed Sandra standing beside her husband, Victor. Luxury cars, private jets, 5-star hotels, foreign vacations. The women admired every picture. "What a handsome couple. They're truly blessed." Ngozi smiled proudly. "My daughter deserves the best." One elderly woman quietly asked, "And Adiz?" Ngozi's smile faded. "Oh, she's somewhere in that fishing village. I heard she's still selling fish." Several women shook their heads with pity. Such a shame. Ngozi felt secretly satisfied. She believed destiny had favored the daughter she loved most. She had no idea that destiny was patiently waiting. Meanwhile, inside Victor's luxurious mansion, appearances hid a frightening reality. Victor paced nervously across his home office while speaking on the phone. "I told you not to panic," a frightened voice answered through the speaker. "The police are asking questions." Victor frowned. "They don't have proof. They've frozen 3 accounts." His face hardened. "I'll handle it." He ended the call and slammed the phone onto the desk. For the first time since their wedding, fear crept into his heart. For years he had operated an elaborate investment scam. He promised wealthy clients impossible profits. Money from new investors paid older investors. On paper, everything looked legitimate. In reality, the entire business was built on lies. Recently, several investors demanded their money back. The scheme had begun collapsing. Victor knew it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. Sandra entered the office carrying coffee. She smiled. "You've been working all morning." Victor quickly forced a smile. "Just business." She handed him the cup. "You look worried." He kissed her forehead. "It's nothing." "Are you sure?" "Of course." Sandra trusted him completely. She never questioned where the money came from. She never asked why he frequently changed phones. She never wondered why he often disappeared late at night. Luxury had distracted her from curiosity. That same week, Adiz and Chinedu attended the opening of a new children's hospital funded by the Okafor Foundation. Journalists gathered outside waiting for interviews. After the ribbon-cutting ceremony, one reporter approached Adiz. "Madame Okafor." She smiled politely. "Yes. You've become one of the most admired women in Enugu." "I don't know about that. What advice would you give young women seeking wealthy husbands?" She laughed softly. "I didn't marry wealth. I married kindness." The reporter looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "My husband happened to be wealthy, but I fell in love with him when I believed he owned nothing except a canoe." Several people listening nearby smiled. Another reporter asked, "If you could change one thing about your past?" Adiz became quiet. "I would wish my father had believed me." Her voice carried no bitterness, only sadness. The interview aired on television that evening. Thousands watched. Among them, Chief Okeke. He sat silently in the sitting room while the interview played. When Adiz mentioned him, his eyes slowly filled with tears. "I would wish my father had believed me." The sentence echoed repeatedly inside his mind. He turned off the television. For months he had carried guilt. Now, the burden became almost unbearable. Ngozi walked in. "What are you watching?" He looked at her. "Adiz." She shrugged. "So?" He spoke quietly. "She never said anything bad about us." Ngozi rolled her eyes. "What did you expect?" "She wants to look good on television." Chief Okeke stared at his wife. For the first time in years, he wondered how many lies he had believed. 2 weeks later, the first arrest warrant was issued. The police received enough evidence linking Victor's investment company to widespread fraud involving billions of naira. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission began monitoring his movements. Investigators quietly collected documents, bank records, property purchases, phone conversations. Everything pointed toward one conclusion. Victor had built his fortune through crime. One Friday afternoon, Sandra prepared for another charity gala. She wore a sparkling silver gown, diamond earrings, matching necklace. As she admired herself in the mirror, she smiled proudly. "My life couldn't be more perfect." Victor walked into the room adjusting his tie. "You look beautiful." She smiled. "So do you." Just then, the doorbell rang. Sandra frowned. "Were you expecting anyone?" Victor looked toward the entrance. "No." One of the security guards hurried inside looking frightened. "Sir, there are officers outside." Victor's face instantly lost color. "What officers?" "The EFCC and the police." Before anyone could react, the front door burst open. Several officers entered carrying official documents. The lead investigator stepped forward. "Victor Ease." Victor remained silent. "We have a warrant for your arrest." Sandra laughed nervously. "There must be a mistake." The investigator looked at her kindly. "Madam, I'm afraid there isn't." He showed the warrant. Victor slowly stepped backward. "I want my lawyer." "You'll have that opportunity." Officers began searching the house. One opened a hidden safe. Another recovered stacks of foreign currency, laptops, hard drives, forged documents, luxury watches, several passports bearing different names. Sandra stared in disbelief. "What is all this?" Victor couldn't answer. One officer carried out boxes filled with financial records. Another announced, "We've found additional evidence." The investigator looked toward Victor. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, forgery, and obtaining money under false pretenses." Handcuffs clicked around Victor's wrists. Sandra's world shattered. Neighbors quickly gathered outside. Many recorded videos on their phones. Television reporters arrived within minutes. News spread across Enugu like wildfire. Prominent businessman arrested. Luxury mansion raided. Multi-billion naira fraud uncovered. As Victor was escorted toward the waiting police vehicle, Sandra grabbed his arm. "Tell them they're lying." He looked away. "Victor, please, say something." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words destroyed every illusion she had believed. She collapsed onto the driveway crying uncontrollably. The cameras captured everything. Within hours, banks froze every account linked to Victor. Government officials sealed his companies. Luxury cars were towed away. The mansion was marked for investigation. Sandra sat alone in the empty living room, unable to move. Her expensive jewelry suddenly felt meaningless. The designer handbags, the luxury furniture, the imported decorations. None of them mattered anymore. Everything had been purchased with stolen money. She whispered to herself, "How did I never see it?" That evening, Ngozi received a frantic phone call. "Mummy!" Sandra could barely speak through her tears. "They've taken him." Ngozi laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" "The police. They arrested Victor." The smile disappeared from Ngozi's face. "What?" "They said he's a fraudster." The phone slipped from Ngozi's hand. Chief Okeke picked it up. "Sandra," she cried uncontrollably. "Daddy, they're saying I knew. They're questioning me too." Chief Okeke felt his knees weaken. The room spun around him. Everything Ngozi had proudly boasted about, everything she had sacrificed Adi's happiness for, had collapsed in a single afternoon. News channels replayed the arrest throughout the night. People who once praised Victor now condemned him. Friends disappeared. Business associates denied knowing him. Party invitations stopped immediately. Many who had envied Sandra now whispered behind her back. "So that's where the money came from. It was all fake. I always suspected something." The same people who once admired her now avoided her. The following morning, Adiz and Chinedu watched the news together over breakfast. The television showed footage of Victor being led into the EFCC headquarters. The reporter explained the allegations: massive investment fraud, money laundering, forgery, international financial crimes. Adiz slowly placed her spoon down. "Oh no." Chinedu looked at her. "You knew him?" She nodded sadly. "Sandra." Tears filled her eyes. Despite everything Sandra had done, she could not celebrate her suffering. Chinedu gently held her hand. "I know what you're thinking. I don't want her life destroyed." He smiled softly. "That's because your heart hasn't changed." She looked at the television again. Sandra appeared briefly, surrounded by journalists. Her makeup had been washed away by tears. She looked frightened, broken, alone. Adiz whispered a quiet prayer. "Lord, please help her." Chinedu looked at his wife with admiration. Most people would have celebrated the downfall of those who once mocked them. Adiz chose compassion instead. He smiled to himself. "My father was right. No amount of wealth could ever create a heart like hers." But even he did not yet know what would happen next. Within 48 hours, investigators would begin questioning Sandra herself. And when the news reached Chief Okeke and Ngozi that their daughter might also be imprisoned, the very people who had rejected Adiz would find themselves standing at the gates of the mansion they never believed she would one day call home. The morning after Victor's arrest, the atmosphere inside the Okeke household was unlike anything it had ever been. Silence. Not the peaceful silence of a quiet home, but the crushing silence of regret. Chief Okeke sat alone on the old wooden chair in the sitting room. The newspaper lay open on his lap, but he had not read a single word. Every front page carried the same headline: "Prominent businessman arrested for multi-billion naira fraud." Below the headline was a large photograph of Victor being led away in handcuffs. Beside him stood Sandra, crying as reporters surrounded her. Chief Okeke slowly removed his glasses. His hands trembled. He remembered the day he had proudly watched Sandra ride away in a Rolls-Royce. He remembered the crowd cheering. He remembered secretly believing that Ngozi had been right all along. Now that same daughter was being questioned by investigators. Everything had changed. Ngozi paced nervously around the sitting room. She had barely slept. Every few minutes she picked up her phone, hoping Sandra would call. Instead, the calls came from neighbors. Some pretended to sympathize. Others simply wanted gossip. A few mocked her openly. "So your billionaire son-in-law wasn't really a billionaire. We always knew something was strange. Money doesn't hide the truth forever." Ngozi switched off her phone. She couldn't bear another conversation. Late that morning, the gate opened. Sandra walked slowly into the compound. She looked nothing like the confident bride everyone had admired months earlier. Her expensive dress was wrinkled. Her hair was untidy. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. She had spent the entire night answering questions from investigators. The moment she saw her parents, she burst into tears. "Mummy!" Ngozi ran toward her. "My daughter!" They hugged tightly. Chief Okeke stood quietly. Sandra looked at him. "Daddy!" He slowly embraced her. "My child!" Sandra cried harder. "I didn't know. I swear. I never knew." Chief Okeke gently stroked her hair. "I believe you." She looked at her mother desperately. "They've frozen all the accounts. They've taken the cars. They've sealed the house. We have nothing." Ngozi felt her legs weaken. "What do you mean nothing?" "Everything," Sandra whispered, "was bought with stolen money." For several days, investigators continued questioning Sandra. Although there was no evidence that she had participated in Victor's crimes, she remained under close investigation. Her passport was temporarily seized. She was ordered to report regularly while the investigation continued. The uncertainty became unbearable. Every knock on the gate made Ngozi jump. Every phone call filled Sandra with fear. She stopped leaving the house. People stared whenever she appeared in public. Some whispered. Others pointed. Many who had once called themselves her friends no longer answered her calls. One evening, Chief Okeke quietly walked into his bedroom. He opened an old wooden drawer. Inside lay a faded photograph. It showed Adiz as a little girl standing beside her late mother. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She smiled so brightly. Chief Okeke stared at the picture for a long time. Then tears slowly rolled down his face. "What have I done?" He remembered carrying Adiz on his shoulders when she was a child. He remembered teaching her how to ride a bicycle. He remembered promising his dying wife, "I'll always protect our daughter." Instead, he had become the very person she needed protection from. He covered his face. "Grace, I'm sorry. I failed her." The following morning, Mama Ifeoma visited. After greeting everyone, she sat quietly. "I heard about Sandra." Ngozi nodded sadly. "It's been difficult." Mama Ifeoma looked at Chief Okeke. "Have you spoken to Adiz?" The room became silent. Ngozi frowned. "What does Adiz have to do with this?" The elderly woman looked directly at her. "Everything." Ngozi folded her arms. "You can't expect us to go begging." Mama Ifeoma sighed. "Why not?" Ngozi remained silent. The old woman continued. "You chased away the only child who never stopped loving this family." Chief Okeke lowered his head. Mama Ifeoma looked at him kindly. "Do you know something?" He shook his head. "I watched Adiz grow up. Even after everything she suffered, she never once spoke badly about any of you." Chief Okeke closed his eyes. "I know. She still calls you Daddy." Those words pierced his heart. That same afternoon, Chinedu arrived home from work. He found Adiz sitting quietly in the garden. She held a cup of tea but hadn't taken a sip. "You've been thinking." She smiled faintly. "A little. About Sandra?" She nodded. "I can't stop wondering how she's coping." Chinedu sat beside her. "You still care." "She's my sister." "Stepsister." Adiz shook her head. "I've never liked that word." He smiled. "Why?" "Because whether she accepted me or not, we still grew up in the same house." She sighed. "I don't hate her." Chinedu gently squeezed her hand. "I know." Just then, one of the security officers hurried into the garden. "Chairman." Chinedu looked up. "Yes. There are visitors at the main gate." "Who?" The officer hesitated. "It's Chief Okeke, his wife, and their daughter Sandra." Adiz froze. Her heart immediately began racing. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Chinedu looked at her gently. "We don't have to see them." She remained silent. After a long pause, she whispered, "No, let them come." At the mansion gates, Chief Okeke stood nervously. The magnificent entrance alone overwhelmed him. Tall black iron gates, beautiful gardens, luxury vehicles parked neatly inside. uniformed security officers. He struggled to believe this was the home of the daughter he had treated like a servant. Sandra stared at the mansion in amazement. So, it's true. Ngozi couldn't speak. Months earlier she had laughed at Adiz for riding inside an old canoe. Now, Adiz lived in one of the finest homes in Enugu. The gates slowly opened. A security officer respectfully escorted them inside. As they walked through the enormous gardens, shame settled heavily upon all three of them. Inside the grand sitting room, Adiz quietly entered. She wore a simple cream-colored dress. No expensive jewelry. Very little makeup. Despite the luxury surrounding her, she remained as humble as ever. The moment Chief Okeke saw her, he broke down. Adiz! His voice cracked. My daughter! He took a few shaky steps forward. Then, to everyone's surprise, he knelt. Daddy! Adiz gasped. She immediately rushed toward him. What are you doing? Chief Okeke shook his head. No! Please! Let me! Tears streamed down his face. I don't deserve to stand before you. Adiz's own eyes filled with tears. Daddy! I failed you. He sobbed openly. I failed your mother. I believed lies. I watched you suffer. And I did nothing. Adiz gently tried to lift him. Please stand. He refused. Not until you forgive me. Sandra slowly stepped forward. Her confident attitude had disappeared completely. She looked at Adiz through tear-filled eyes. I hated you, she whispered. I envied you. I always thought people loved you more. Adiz remained silent. Sandra continued crying. So when Mummy told me to pretend, I agreed. I stole what belonged to you. She covered her face. I'm sorry. I've regretted it every single day. Everyone turned toward Ngozi. She remained standing quietly. For the first time in years, she had nothing to say. No excuses. No lies. Only regret. Finally, she slowly walked toward Adiz. Her voice trembled. I don't expect forgiveness. Adiz looked at her. I don't even know why I hated you so much. She wiped away tears. You reminded me of your mother. I was jealous. She was everything I wasn't. Kind. Patient. Loved by everyone. I let jealousy poison my heart. She fell to her knees. I'm sorry. Adiz stood completely still. The woman who had spent years insulting her was now kneeling before her. Silence filled the room. Only quiet sobbing could be heard. Chinedu watched everything without interrupting. He knew this moment belonged entirely to Adiz. She slowly looked from one face to another. Her father, broken. Sandra, ashamed. Ngozi, defeated. Memories flooded back. The beatings, the insults, the hunger, the tears, the lonely nights, the wedding day, the laughter from the riverbank, the canoe. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her voice was calm. I forgave all of you. A long time ago. Everyone looked at her in disbelief. Chief Okeke whispered, What? She smiled sadly. If I carried hatred all these years, it would have destroyed me. Tears flowed freely down Sandra's face. Ngozi couldn't stop crying. Chief Okeke reached for Adiz's hands. You truly are your mother's daughter. After everyone had calmed down, Chinedu quietly joined them. Chief Okeke immediately stood. My son. Chinedu smiled warmly. Daddy. The word surprised the older man. You still call me that? You are Adiz's father. Chief Okeke shook his head. I don't deserve such respect. Chinedu smiled. Respect isn't earned only when people are perfect. It's also shown when they choose to change. Chief Okeke felt tears welling up again. You've become the son I should have welcomed from the beginning. Sandra looked toward Chinedu nervously. I have a favor to ask. He nodded. Go ahead. She swallowed hard. The investigators. They still think I might have known about Victor's fraud. I didn't. I swear. I believe you. Her eyes widened. You do. He nodded. I've already made a few inquiries. Sandra looked hopeful. Really? There isn't any evidence linking you directly. But the investigation still needs to be completed. She lowered her head. I'm afraid. Chinidou looked thoughtfully at her. I know several senior lawyers. I also know people who can ensure the investigation remains fair. Sandra stared at him. You'd do that? After everything I did? He smiled gently. If kindness only existed for good people, none of us would deserve it. Hope slowly returned to Sandra's eyes. Ngozi looked at Adiz in disbelief. How did you find such a husband? Adiz smiled softly. I didn't. She looked affectionately toward Chinidou. God did. Everyone laughed quietly through their tears. For the first time in many years, the family sat together peacefully. But outside the mansion walls, the investigation into Victor's crimes continued. Although Chinidou's legal team would soon help prove Sandra's innocence, the full truth about Victor's criminal empire was only beginning to emerge. And before the case finally ended, one last public lesson would remind everyone in Enugu that wealth built on deception can disappear overnight, but a heart built on kindness only grows richer with time. The days that followed the emotional reunion at Chinidou's mansion were filled with uncertainty. Although Sandra had returned to her parents' house, she was still under investigation. Every few days, she received a phone call asking her to report to the offices of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. She answered every question honestly, but the fear of being wrongly accused never left her heart. At night, she could barely sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the moment Victor had been led away in handcuffs. She remembered the flashing cameras, the whispers, the shame. Most of all, she remembered the day she had stolen Adiz's happiness by pretending to be the kind-hearted daughter everyone admired. She covered her face with her hands. If only I had told the truth, she whispered. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she truly understood the pain she had caused someone else. Across the city, Adiz could not stop thinking about Sandra. She stood on the balcony of the mansion watching the sunrise over Enugu while holding a cup of tea. Chinidou quietly joined her. You've been standing here for almost an hour. She smiled faintly. I know. You're thinking about them. She nodded. I'm worried. He leaned against the balcony rail. I thought you forgave them. I did. Then why are you still carrying their burden? Adiz sighed deeply. Forgiveness doesn't stop you from caring. She looked toward the distant hills. When I was suffering, I always wished someone would help me. She turned toward her husband. How can I ignore them now that I have the ability to help? Chinidou smiled. That's exactly why I fell in love with you. Later that morning, Chinidou invited his legal advisor, Barrister Emeka Nwosu, to the mansion. Emeka had worked with Chinidou's companies for nearly 15 years, and was one of the most respected lawyers in southeastern Nigeria. After greeting everyone, he opened several files on the conference table. I've reviewed Sandra's case. Adiz looked hopeful. What did you find? The lawyer adjusted his glasses. The investigators have found overwhelming evidence against Victor. He opened another file. But, he looked at Adiz. There is no evidence that Sandra participated in his crimes. Adiz clasped her hands together. Thank God. Emeka continued. Unfortunately, because she benefited from property purchased with stolen money, investigators are still verifying whether she had knowledge of the fraud. Can anything be done? Adiz asked. The lawyer nodded. Yes. If we can provide evidence that she neither managed the finances nor participated in Victor's businesses, her position becomes much stronger. Chinidou looked at him. What do you need? Witnesses, financial records, character references, and experienced legal representation. Chinidou did not hesitate. You have everything you need. That afternoon, Chinidou called together his legal team. Nearly a dozen lawyers gathered in the boardroom of Okafor Global Holdings. Some had represented multinational corporations. Others specialized in financial crimes. After introducing Sandra's situation, Chinidou spoke firmly. I want one thing to be clear. Everyone listened carefully. If Sandra is guilty, we will not interfere. The lawyers nodded. But if she is innocent, Then she deserves justice. One of the senior attorneys smiled. That's exactly how the law should work. Chinedu nodded. Good. Let's begin. News that Chinedu Okafor's legal team had taken interest in the case spread quickly through legal circles. Several investigators welcomed the development. They already suspected Sandra had been deceived just like many others. The legal team carefully examined bank statements, property records, emails, phone logs, and business documents. Every new piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. Victor had deliberately hidden his criminal activities from his wife. He controlled every company personally. He used fake directors, secret bank accounts, forged contracts. Sandra's name appeared nowhere except as his spouse. Meanwhile, Sandra remained emotionally broken. One afternoon she visited Mama Ifioma. The elderly woman welcomed her warmly. My daughter. Sandra lowered her head. I don't deserve your kindness. Mama Ifioma smiled gently. Sit. They sat beneath the familiar mango tree. For several minutes neither spoke. Finally Sandra whispered, I've been remembering everything. What things? The way I treated Adiz. Mama Ifioma looked quietly at her. I laughed when people mocked her. Sandra nodded. I lied. I insulted her. I even stole the husband who came looking for her. She covered her face. I've never hated myself this much. The elderly woman reached across and gently held her hand. Regret can either destroy a person or change them. Sandra looked up. I want to change. Then begin by becoming the woman you pretended to be. Sandra frowned slightly. What do you mean? You pretended to be kind. You pretended to be humble. You pretended to care. Mama Ifioma smiled. Now become those things for real. Sandra sat quietly. Those words stayed with her long after she returned home. A week later, Adiz decided to visit her father. Instead of arriving with a convoy, she asked Chinedu to drive only one SUV. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. When they reached the old house, Chief Okeke hurried outside. The moment he saw Adiz, his face lit up. My daughter! He embraced her tightly. This time there was no hesitation, no distance, only love. I'm happy you came. So am I, Daddy. The word filled his heart with joy. Inside the house, Adiz noticed many changes. The atmosphere felt different. Sandra now prepared meals. Ngozi swept the compound herself. Chief Okeke washed his own clothes. There were no harsh voices, no insults, no shouting. The home that had once been filled with bitterness had become surprisingly peaceful. As they ate lunch together, Chief Okeke cleared his throat. I've been thinking. Everyone looked toward him. I want to sell part of my land. Ngozi frowned. Why? I want to repay Adiz. Adiz immediately shook her head. Daddy, you don't owe me money. I owe you much more than money. She smiled gently. You owe me only one thing. What? Keep loving your family. Chief Okeke's eyes filled with tears. I can do that. I promise. Several days later, the investigation reached its final stage. Sandra and her lawyers attended one last interview with investigators. The lead investigator carefully reviewed the findings. He looked toward Sandra. Mrs. Ease. Sandra's hands trembled. Yes, sir. We have completed our investigation. The room became silent. All available evidence confirms that you did not participate in your husband's fraudulent activities. Sandra closed her eyes. Tears immediately streamed down her face. The investigator continued. Your assets obtained directly from the fraudulent scheme remain subject to forfeiture. She nodded. I understand. But you are no longer considered a suspect. For several seconds Sandra could not speak. Then she whispered, Thank you. Her lawyer smiled. Outside the building, she immediately called Adiz. The phone rang only once. Adiz? Yes. Her voice broke with emotion. It's over. Adiz smiled. You're free. Sandra began crying. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. No. I do. If not for Chinedu, if not for you, I might still be fighting alone. Adiz laughed softly. We're sisters. Sandra smiled through her tears. For the first time, I actually believe that. News of Sandra's clearance spread quickly across Enugu. Several newspapers corrected their earlier reports. Many people admitted they had judged her too quickly. Others praised the fairness of the investigation. Some journalists approached Chinedu asking whether he had influenced the outcome. He answered simply, "No, the evidence did. We only made sure the truth was heard." His response earned widespread respect. Weeks later, Chief Okeke organized a family gathering. Relatives from different parts of Enugu attended. Many had heard rumors about everything that had happened. After everyone settled down, Chief Okeke stood. His hands shook slightly. "I have something important to say." The room became quiet. He looked toward Adiz. "My daughter." She smiled. "I wronged you. I believed lies. I chose fear instead of truth." He turned toward the gathered relatives. "I want everyone here to know that Adiz never deserved the suffering she endured in my house." Several relatives looked shocked. Some had suspected as much for years. Chief Okeke continued, "Today, I publicly ask my daughter to forgive me." The room fell silent. Adiz slowly stood. She walked toward her father. Without saying a word, she embraced him. Tears flowed freely from both of them. The relatives applauded softly. Ngozi also stood. She faced everyone. "I was cruel. I allowed jealousy to control my heart. I thought if Adiz suffered, my own daughter would shine brighter." She looked toward Sandra. "But instead, I nearly destroyed both daughters." Sandra gently held her mother's hand. "We'll become better together." Ngozi nodded. "Yes." As the gathering ended, one elderly uncle approached Chinedu. "My son." "Yes, uncle. You had every reason to seek revenge." Chinedu smiled. "I know, but you chose kindness." He looked toward Adiz laughing with her father. "I simply followed my wife's example." The old man smiled. "Then both of you are truly wealthy." That evening, as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the hills of Enugu, Adiz and Chinedu stood together outside the mansion. They watched children from their charity foundation playing happily in the gardens. Some had lost parents. Others had escaped abusive homes. Now they laughed freely. Adiz smiled. "Do you remember our first home? The little fishing hut?" Chinedu laughed. "The roof that leaked every time it rained?" She nodded. "I'd live there again." He looked surprised. "Really? As long as you were there." He gently took her hand. "I'd choose you in every lifetime." She leaned her head against his shoulder. Far behind them, the setting sun painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange and gold. The storms of the past had finally passed. But one final chapter remained. A chapter that would show how two people who had once been mocked for riding in an old canoe would transform their painful experiences into hope for countless others throughout Enugu. Because the greatest victory is not becoming wealthy. It is using your blessings to lift those who are still struggling. Nearly 2 years passed after the day Chinedu revealed the truth about his identity. To many people across Enugu, Mr. and Mrs. Chinedu Okafor had become one of the city's most admired couples. Yet anyone who met them for the first time would never have guessed how painful their journey had been. Every morning, Chinedu still preferred to begin his day with a simple walk through the gardens before leaving for work. Adiz still greeted every member of the household staff by name. She still thanked the cooks after every meal. She still visited the security officers during rainy days to make sure they had warm tea. No amount of wealth had changed her heart. If anything, it had made her even more compassionate. One afternoon, a young housemaid accidentally dropped an expensive crystal vase while cleaning the hallway. The vase shattered across the marble floor. The frightened girl immediately fell to her knees. "I'm sorry, madam. I'm so sorry." She expected shouting, perhaps dismissal. Instead, Adiz hurried over. "Are you hurt?" The young maid blinked in surprise. "What? Your hands." Adiz gently took them and examined them carefully. Tiny pieces of glass had cut one of her fingers. "You need first aid." The maid began crying. I broke the vase. Adiz smiled warmly. A vase can be replaced. You cannot. The other staff members quietly watched the scene. One elderly cleaner whispered to another, "That's why everyone loves her." Later that evening, Chinidu returned home from work carrying a large envelope. He found Adiz reading with several children in the mansion's library. They were children from nearby orphanages whom the couple regularly invited every weekend. The children rushed toward him. "Uncle Chinidu," he laughed as they hugged him. "I missed all of you." One little boy proudly showed him a drawing. "I drew your canoe." Chinidu laughed loudly. "You remembered the canoe?" The boy nodded. "Auntie Adiz told us that's where your love story began." He smiled. "It certainly did." After the children returned to their books, Chinidu handed the envelope to Adiz. "What's this?" "Open it." She carefully opened the envelope. Inside were architectural drawings. She looked confused. "What am I looking at?" Chinidu smiled. "Our next project." He spread the drawings across the table. "This is a community center." Adiz examined the plans carefully. There were classrooms, a medical clinic, a vocational training center, dormitories, counseling offices, a large hall, gardens. She looked up. "It's beautiful. It's yours." "My what?" "I've already purchased the land." She looked at him in surprise. "What for?" Chinidu gently held her hand. "I've been thinking." "So have I." He smiled. "I know. I want us to build something that outlives us." She studied the plans again. "What will we call it?" He smiled softly. "The Grace Foundation." Adiz looked at him in confusion. "My mother's name?" He nodded. "She raised the woman who changed my life. I think it's a fitting tribute." Tears immediately filled Adiz's eyes. She hugged him tightly. "Thank you." Construction began only a few weeks later. The project attracted attention throughout Enugu. Many local companies donated materials. Doctors volunteered their services. Teachers offered free classes. Young people signed up as volunteers. When journalists asked why she had chosen this project, Adiz smiled. "I know what it feels like to believe nobody cares. If we can give even one child hope, then every naira spent will be worthwhile." The foundation officially opened 1 year later. Hundreds of guests attended. Traditional rulers, community leaders, teachers, pastors, market women, fishermen from the riverside village, employees from Chinidu's companies, children from orphanages. Even the village elders who had once watched Adiz arrive in an old canoe proudly sat in the front row. Mama Ifioma smiled through tears. "I always knew her morning would come." Chief Okeke and Ngozi arrived together holding hands. Time had changed both of them. Chief Okeke looked healthier. Ngozi had become noticeably quieter. Life had humbled her. As they entered the beautifully decorated hall, many guests greeted them warmly. No longer did they introduce themselves proudly as the parents of Sandra. Instead, they smiled whenever people said, "You're Adiz's parents." Those words filled Chief Okeke with both pride and regret. He silently thanked God for giving him a second chance. Sandra also attended. She no longer wore extravagant designer outfits. Instead, she dressed simply. Since the investigation ended, she had dedicated herself to honest work. Using skills she learned during difficult times, she had started a small event planning business. It wasn't luxurious, but it was honest. She often told clients, "I'd rather earn little with peace than gain everything through lies." Her business gradually grew. People respected her sincerity. The painful lessons of the past had transformed her into a different woman. During the opening ceremony, the master of ceremonies invited Adiz to speak. As she walked toward the podium, the audience rose in applause. She looked across the crowd. She saw her husband smiling proudly. She saw the fishermen who had once welcomed her into their village. She saw the housemaids from the mansion. She saw children laughing in the front row. She saw her father wiping away tears. For a moment, she simply stood quietly. Then she began. "Many years ago, I believed my life would never change. The hall became completely silent. I lost my mother when I was very young. I grew up believing that perhaps I wasn't worthy of love. She paused. But I was wrong. She smiled toward Chinidu. Sometimes life takes us through painful roads, not to destroy us, but to prepare us. She looked toward the children. If anyone here feels forgotten, please remember this. Your present circumstances do not decide your future. Kindness is never wasted. Patience is never wasted. Faith is never wasted. The audience applauded loudly. Next, Chinidu was invited to speak. He walked to the podium and smiled. When people hear my story, they often remember the mansion. They remember the companies. They remember the money. He laughed softly. But those aren't the greatest blessings God gave me. He looked toward Adiz. My greatest blessing stepped into an old canoe wearing a borrowed wedding gown. The audience smiled. I disguised myself as a poor fisherman because I wanted someone to love me. He shook his head. What I didn't realize was that I needed someone who would teach me to trust again. He looked lovingly at his wife. Adiz did both. The hall erupted into applause. After the speeches, several children performed traditional Igbo dances. The fisherman presented Chinidu with a beautifully carved wooden paddle as a symbol of gratitude. One elderly fisherman smiled. You may own many companies now, but you'll always be one of us. Chinidu accepted the gift proudly. I always will. He later placed the paddle inside the mansion as one of his most treasured possessions. As evening approached, the guests gathered for a simple meal. Nothing extravagant, exactly as Adiz wanted. While everyone ate together, Chief Okeke quietly approached his daughter. My child. She smiled. Daddy. He held her hands. I've been meaning to tell you something. I'm listening. When your mother was dying, she made me promise to protect you. His voice trembled. I broke that promise. Adiz gently squeezed his hands. But today, he smiled through tears. You've protected all of us. She embraced him tightly. We're family. That's what family does. Nearby, Ngozi watched the embrace with tear-filled eyes. She slowly walked over. Adiz. Yes, Mama. The word stunned her. Even after everything, Adiz still called her Mama. Ngozi began crying again. I don't deserve that. Adiz smiled gently. Maybe not. They both laughed softly. But forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about choosing peace. Ngozi hugged her tightly. Thank you. Later that night, after the guests had gone home, Adiz and Chinidu returned to the riverside village. They often visited whenever they wanted to escape the noise of the city. The old fishing hut still stood. Chinidu had repaired it but refused to replace it. This place reminds us where our love truly began, he always said. They sat inside the old canoe that had carried them on their wedding day. The river flowed peacefully beneath the moonlight. Adiz smiled. Do you remember what you told me here? Chinidu laughed. I've said many things. She gently rested her head on his shoulder. You promised I'd never cry alone again. He kissed her forehead. And I intend to keep that promise forever. She looked at the calm water. So much has changed. He nodded. Except one thing. What? I still love the same woman. She smiled. And I still love the same fisherman. They both laughed. The billionaire and his wife sat quietly in the old canoe, grateful that they had never forgotten where their journey began. Across Enugu, people often told the story of the poor girl who rowed away in a canoe while her stepsister rowed away in a Rolls-Royce. At first, it sounded like a story about wealth. But those who knew the truth understood its real lesson. The Rolls-Royce had carried pride, deception, and borrowed riches. The old canoe had carried honesty, humility, and genuine love. One journey ended in disgrace. The other led to a life filled with peace, purpose, and lasting joy. And whenever anyone asked Adiz what the greatest blessing of her life had been, she never mentioned the mansion, the billions, or the fame. She simply smiled and answered, I married a fisherman with a kind heart, because in the end that was the man she had truly fallen in love with. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.